One day, the hero was returning home. He was thinking that his foray into the forbidden forest had lasted a little longer than usual. The guy was supposed to be back 3 days ago. The guy looked around in surprise. He began to enter the rooms, being completely at a loss. Agredios decided that the house was somehow too quiet. Entering one of the rooms, he called out to his parents again. The young man was walking along the beach. He was thinking that he had not seen the hyena hunter, his wife, and the twins Percy and Perura in the city. Agredios suggested that maybe he could find them on the beach. He noticed that there were footprints in the sand. The guy decided that these probably belonged to adults, but they were still kind of strange. Agredios thought they were supporting each other as they walked. He concluded that it looked like they had managed to escape to the shore. So in front of him, Agredios saw a man and 2 children lying unconscious on the sand. He knelt down and decided to take a look. The guy wondered if the same thing had happened to the children. He decided to check it out and was very surprised. The guy decided to return to the witch. He called out to her, and she looked at him in surprise. The witch saw Agredios running towards her with all his legs and holding the children in both hands. He couldn't catch his breath and wanted to ask her to save them. The witch shouted that they were still alive. Agredios asked her to save them. The children began to breathe heavily and did not come to their senses. At the same time, the witch cast a spell and blew it out so that the magical energy would get directly into their mouths. Agredios was very nervous and could not find a place for himself. He bent over the children and carefully observed their condition. Tears were streaming from his eyes, and the young man began to call Perura and Percy. He noticed how the children had just opened their eyes and immediately identified him, calling him young master. After opening the door, the guy stopped. He saw that his father was unconscious. Agredios dropped the dead bird on the floor. He noticed that his father was not moving. At this time, Perua smiled broadly and told Agredios not to cry. She held out her hands to him. The young man immediately hugged both children and hugged them closer to him. Agredios turned to the witch and said that he was very ashamed of all that he had said to her earlier. He lowered his head and noticed that despite all this, she still helped him in everything. The witch was lying on the ground and looked at him in surprise. Agredios smiled and continued to cry. He said she was the one who saved Percy and Perura, and he thanked the witch for what she had done for them. The witch smiled at his words. Agredios continued to cry bitterly. The guy thought that he had brought the witch to tears, although he apologized. But what Agredios had done earlier was simply inexcusable. The young man continued to apologize to the witch, as he was very ashamed. He added that his father and mother appointed him to be the defender of these lands, and that is why the young man must do everything so that these children can live here the same way as before. His father's last wish was only to rebuild this city. He noticed that despite this, his desire to overcome what had caused so many disasters was not weak. Agredios added that he needs a strong person to help him rebuild everything in the city. He looked into the witch's eyes and asked her if she could help him. With the help of her wisdom, lent him a helping hand. The witch was amazed by what she had just heard from the young man. The young man looked at them in horror and covered his mouth with his hand. In front of him was his mother, who was lying on the bed, and his father, who put his head next to her. She threw her head back and shouted loudly that she only wanted to go back home. Agredios' eyes widened. He was shocked by what he saw in front of him. The witch continued to scream. She lifted her legs up while lying on the ground. Percy and Perura immediately closed the guy's eyes so that he couldn't see it all. The witch continued to scream in horror that Agredios would make her feel cold, hot, and uncomfortable again. The witch continued to hold her legs up, and the children still did not let go of the young man and covered his eyes. Meanwhile, in one of the buildings, a girl was writing on paper. They approached her and informed her that the merchants had already returned and added that, in any case, they would have to report it, since the borderlands were destroyed. The girl was very surprised when she heard these words. There was a book open in front of her, and she was sitting at the table. The girl asked again if they were definitely destroyed. Agredios turned to Percy and Perura and asked if they had already said goodbye to their parents. The children replied that they did. The witch immediately began to cast a spell to send their parents to another world. Gradually, they began to disappear until there was nothing left. Percy and Perura watched in silence as their parents left them. Agredios held the children by the shoulders. He felt very sorry for them. Unexpectedly for the young man, Percy and Perura turned to look at him. They smiled happily and told the guy that they would be fine. Agredios approached them. He asked his father what had happened, but no one answered him. The hero noticed that he was holding a folded piece of paper in his hands. Agredios looked at them in obvious surprise. He didn't understand why the children were behaving like that, because their parents had died. Percy said that, in any case, fishing is still a very dangerous job. They understood that in this regard, their parents could leave them at any moment. Perura added that they always told them that if this happened, they would always have to stick together. She noticed that, besides, since the young Mr. Agredios was with them, she would not be so sad. Meanwhile, the children came up to the witch and took her hands. Perura said that now, they have a new one. Percy asked if she was a friend of the young master. The young man wanted to answer that she was a witch, but he came to his senses and said that this girl was a sorceress. He thought about how he couldn't just tell them that. The children exclaimed joyfully and smiled broadly. They said it was very cool. This delighted Perura and Percy. They decided to introduce themselves to the sorceress and bowed. The witch also did this to greet them. Agredios watched them curiously. The witch smiled sweetly at them, and the children were happy to meet her. The hero decided that it looked like the witch loved children. Percy suggested that everyone finally go home together and have a good rest. It's going to get dark soon. The children were walking and at the same time holding the sorceress's hands. They asked the girl what her name was. She replied that her name was Ganancitia. The children couldn't pronounce the letter det in her name. He took it and immediately wondered to whom this letter should have been addressed. Therefore, they exclaimed joyfully and called her Ganancia. Agredios thought about her name. So, after a while, they came to the house. The young man told them to wait, as he needed to turn on the light. When he appeared, the hero invited them to go to the bedroom. As soon as Agredios finished speaking, he immediately stopped. He saw the children hanging in Ganancetia's arms and falling asleep. The girl could barely hold them. Agredios asked her if the children had fallen asleep, and then added that it was not surprising at all, because they were so exhausted that day. The young man took the children off her to put them to bed. He told Ganancia to follow him. They went into a room with two beds side by side. The young man put Perura and Percy on the same bed and covered them with a blanket. He said that the girl could stay in the next bed. Agredios told her that they would see each other tomorrow and wished her good night, closing the door to the room. Ganancia smiled. She looked around in surprise and looked at the room. The girl did not understand exactly where she needed to lie down. So Ganancia decided to lie down in the bed where the children were lying, just between Percy and Perura. Meanwhile, Agredios was sitting on the floor and holding his head. The young man thought with horror about how weak he was. Agredios stood up and thought about how to rebuild the city in general and what he had been thinking about all this time. He can't even imagine how he will be able to feed the four of them in the future. The guy came to the conclusion that he doesn't even know how to be with breakfast. Agredios began to read the letter. His eyes widened in surprise as he noticed that the letter was addressed to him. Agredios wondered who would look after the children when he went hunting, and what would happen if he returned home empty-handed. And you will need to learn how to cook. The hero thought that, really, they would have to drag out a miserable existence, barely making ends meet. He decided that he had had enough. After all, you need to solve problems gradually, step by step. Agredios thought that it would be good if only the kingdom would help them. The young man did not even notice how he fell asleep. The hero woke up because he felt some kind of smell. He exclaimed in horror that he had overslept everything. Agredios quickly rushed to the kitchen. He was worried and said he had to cook something for breakfast. He was wondering if there was anything in the kitchen at all. The young man decided that he needed to make bread, but he didn't know how to do it at all. Agredios immediately went to the table to find the flour, as it was supposed to be here. He also realized that he also needed water. The guy was indignant at how bread is generally obtained among this messin. He came out of the kitchen and decided that it was better for him to go hunting after all. Agredios went into the room where the children and Ganancia were, and all in order to tell them that they can sleep longer. The guy apologized for bothering him and opened the door, but unexpectedly discovered that there was no one in the room. Agredios left the house and came to the conclusion that, it seems, Ganancia decided to return to the forest, and those two if they went somewhere, then only to their house, which is located on the coast. The young man was worried that the children had not shed a tear yesterday. He even wanted to praise them for their resilience, but apparently it was just a mask. The guy immediately ran out of the house as soon as he finished reading the letter. Agredios immediately put on a mask. The three of them must have left. Ganansisha was with them too. Agredios noticed footprints in the sand. He thought they looked pretty fresh. He wondered why they led to the sea and not to their house. Meanwhile, Ganansisha and her children were on the shore. Perura noticed that there was a huge fish nearby. Percy was screaming for her to get ready. The children started fishing, and Ganansisha watched curiously what they were doing. Percy caught a fish and mixed it into a pot. Later, they began to peel and carve it. Percy said they usually use a fish's head as bait, so they can catch many more of them. Perura noticed that they had caught enough already. There were a lot of caught fish in her basket. Therefore, she suggested that everyone should already go back. Percy agreed with her. Percy and Perura took Ganansitia's hands again and exclaimed joyfully that the young gentleman would obviously be very happy. On the way back, Ganansisha's feet ended up in the water. She felt very strange and stopped. The girl immediately fell to the sand. Percy asked what had scared the girl so much. Ganansitia replied with fear that she felt some small white bubbles. Perura replied that it was because she was without shoes, and now there will be big bubbles as a wave was coming. Ganansisha screamed as she was back in the water. The children fell from the incoming wave and Ganansisha's dress was pulled up. Percy stood up and started laughing. She asked Ganansisha if she had ever been to the sea before. In his letter, the young man's father wrote that he hoped that Agredios would receive this letter, since a witch came here a week ago. News of this reached other hunters as well. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She felt as if there was something in her nose and shouted loudly. The children began to laugh at her. Percy noticed that it was just a shrimp that was stuck in her nose. It looked pretty tasty. Smokebreak said she would catch it now and immediately pulled it out. Percy noticed that the shrimp were also stuck in Ganansisia's hair. Perura took it upon herself to calm the girl down and said that everything would be fine. Perura also pulled one of the shrimp from her hair and apologized to Ganansisha for making fun of her. Perura was putting them in a basket, and Percy said that they were real gifts of nature. Ganansisha sighed and noticed how the bright sun began to illuminate everything around. All three of them were watching this. The girl noticed that she felt very warm and she stretched out her hand forward. She took Perura and Percy's hands and held them up to her face. The girl noticed that they were also very warm. The children continued to smile broadly. Perura suggested that they finally return to the mansion. Percy added that they should definitely eat more shrimp. Perura and Percy turned around and noticed Agredios running towards them. The children exclaimed and greeted him with raised hands. The young man asked what they were doing here. Agredios came closer to them and asked how they managed to catch so many fish. Perura replied that they just grabbed the fish with their hands when the water receded. Percy took Ganansitia's hand and added that the girl had also caught shrimps. Agredios ran to the gate and immediately opened it. He looked around in horror. The letter said that some strange wind had blown. Agredios noticed that, it turns out, they took advantage of the ebb tide. He said it was just incredible and asked how about having breakfast. After a while, everyone was at home. Agredios started cooking. He had completely forgotten that he had recently caught a pheasant. The young man looked into one pot and thought that he could be fried, even though he had been lying here all day. Agredios hoped that would be enough for them. Percy started cleaning the fish with a knife. Perua ran up to the Agredios and held the fish in her hands. She told him not to forget to roast it. He thought that he had not been mistaken in taking these children under his wing. After all, this will help him find the strength to live on. The young man asked Perura to pump the water further. Finally, the food was served to the table. Agredios put one of the plates on the table and said their order was ready. The children were very happy and wished them a pleasant appetite. Perura and Percy began to eat and devoured the food with great appetite. The young man was pouring water and told Gananseti to join them too. He asked her if she ate meat. The girl looked at them in surprise, and saliva suddenly flowed from her mouth. Percy looked at her in disbelief. Agredios asked her if she didn't even know how to eat properly. The girl asked him again. The young man told her that first you need to put a piece of food in your mouth, then chew and swallow. It is from food that people can get various nutrients. He offered her one piece of meat on a skewer and looked at her. Agredios noticed that she was salivating because Ganansisha was hungry. He suggested that Yi try the food, as it is very tasty. Because of him, the servant fainted, followed by his wife. So Father Agredios had no more time at all. The guy added that he would bring her plate now. The girl said she couldn't do that. Agredios told her to look carefully at how to do it. Ganansatia took a piece in her mouth and ate it. She was surprised by how delicious the food turned out to be. Perura took a plate of shrimp to serve it to the table. Percy exclaimed happily. She gave one of the shrimps to the girl in her hand and told her to definitely try it. Ganansisha agreed with her. She tasted the shrimp and looked very pleased. Agredios thought that she must have liked the food, and he was very happy about it. The young man reflected that the skills of these children are simply necessary in order to survive. They will help where the guy himself cannot cope. The young man turned to Perura and Persa and said that their fish was very tasty. The children smiled contentedly at his words. Suddenly, Agredios heard someone scream and abruptly got up from the table. Ganansatia was very scared, and the children looked at the young man in disbelief. The guy quickly went to the window and opened it. He saw a girl sitting on the ground, screaming loudly and calling for help. Agredios immediately ran out of the house towards her. He asked her if everything was okay and where she came from. He decided that his father would lecture him for a long time because of this. The young man sighed with fatigue, as the journey home was very long. The guy noticed that a man with a woman and a child were lying on the ground. He fell to his knees, looking at them. Agredios closed the eyes of the dead child. The young man sat down next to her. The girl started to say something about the hive. She shouted that there was a live hive there, and her mom, dad, and Butch stayed there. The guy asked her again. The girl began to rise. Agredios asked her if the hive was chasing them and if everyone was running from the south. The stranger replied that yes. The young man asked how big this hive was. He was told that there would be more Butch. Agredios thought that usually a whole squad is sent against this monster. However, he definitely cannot cope alone. The guy put on a raincoat, a special mask, and also took explosive devices with him. The young man armed himself with a sharp spear and decided that if Ganansisha was with him, then perhaps they could even win. The girl left the house, holding hands with Perura and Percy. Agredios called out to them. He supported the exhausted stranger and told the children to take her with them and hide, as well as grab more water. The young man turned to Ganansatia and said that she would definitely go with him. The girl looked at him in disbelief. Agredios took Ganansisha in his arms and told everyone that they would see each other soon. The girl screamed in surprise. During his journey, the young man noticed smoke. He put down the Ganansatia and shouted for those people who were there to run to them as soon as possible. The young man asked the girl if she saw a giant wasp in the distance. He said she was still chasing those people. Agredios asked Ganansatia to use her root magic. The girl looked at him in surprise. They noticed a carriage driving fast in front of them. Agredios told Ganansisha to aim her horses at the wasp's belly and turn it over. Then the young man will finish her off himself. He was in pain, and he didn't understand what he needed to do next. Tears appeared in the young man's eyes, and he began to cry bitterly, holding the letter in his hands. There was more and more smoke, and the wagon with people continued to drive on. Agredios told the girl to act on his signal. He told her to rely on him. The huge wasp was advancing. The young man told Ganansatia to start already. The girl immediately took her staff and cast a spell. Small roots began to emerge from the ground. They were immediately crushed by the monster. Ganansisha said that only such roots grow on this land. The people from the cart asked what the guy and the girl would do. Agredios immediately took Ganansatia with one hand and apologized to her. He threw the girl right into the cart and told people to take her away from here and take her away as soon as possible. People asked how the Agredios would be now. The young man replied that he had to end the wasp here and now. Agredios decided to go further. Ganansisha shouted after him to wait and not go any further. The guy was thinking that he would not let the wasp get to the village. Agredios saw a monster in front of him and decided to prepare for the upcoming battle. He decided to throw a fire stick at the wasp. The young man began to attack and use the spear. He tried to punch the monster, but it didn't work out. Agredios fell to the ground, and a swarm of wasps flew at him. He decided that if he couldn't do it that way, then it was better to try to crack it anyway. His father asked him, being the defender of these lands, to gather all the survivors and lead the village in his place. Looking back, he saw in front of him were many people who were already dead. The young man noticed that the wasp's head was protected by wasps. He thought that since the monster was not afraid of fire, then he could try something else. Agredios threw a sharp spear at the wasp with all his might. Thus, he managed to inflict significant damage to this monster. The giant wasp prepared to attack the guy. Agredios tried his best not to get caught by her and go unnoticed. The young man noticed that, of course, the wasp had pretty strong jaws. He immediately took the rope and grabbed it, tying it tightly. Agredios added that now the wasp's jaw would simply not be strong enough. Meanwhile, the wasp was trying to free itself. The young man decided that it was necessary to attack while there was such an opportunity. Agredios took the weapon. He decided that he needed to hit the wasp in the blind spot. The young man was behind her and struck her. At the same time, a large attacking swarm of wasps flew at him. The guy wondered why they were all here. After all, before that, wasps attacked people who had escaped. Agredios wondered if he was right, then why they had returned. He saw in front of him a huge swarm of wasps, which was coming right at him. He thought about how their thirst for death was growing. The guy was thinking that maybe he should try to run to the forest, because there, most likely, the rope would be more useful. The young man immediately came to the conclusion that the wasps would catch up with him anyway. They surrounded us from all sides. He wondered how long the cloak would be able to hold them back. He clutched the letter in his hands. Tears continued to flow in his eyes. Agredios clutched the letter in his hands and furiously declared that he would kill the one who did all this. Agredios noticed their hive and decided that now he definitely needed to finish it off, no matter what it cost him. Suddenly, the young man noticed an armed girl on a horse rushing ahead. He realized that she would also attack the monster, so he ran to the side, holding the rope to turn the wasp. Agredios did this so that the girl could hit her. He shouted at her to aim at her neck. The girl ran towards the wasp and, taking a sword, pierced her neck. Agredios ran forward, followed by an attacking swarm of roes. He shouted at the girl not to worry about him. The guy asked her for only one favor. He wanted the girl to tell the twins that they needed a net and tar. She immediately mounted her horse and ran towards the city. When the girl was in the city, she began to remember the names of those twins. She called them loudly. Meanwhile, a window opened in the house, from which Perura, Percy, and others looked out. The girl took off her helmet and sighed heavily from fatigue. She asked if they would help her. She was immediately hailed, calling her Mrs. Grimel. After a while, Perura pointed the way and said that there should have been a large network here in the tailor shop. The girl pointed this out to the workers who had just entered here. Meanwhile, Percy took a bucket of tar. She noticed that it was very sticky and there wasn't much left. So he opened the gates and decided to leave the city to take revenge on the one who killed his family and many other people. The young man decided to go to the forbidden forest. One of the people said it was much better than nothing. The man told Perura to be careful as she passed next to them, and they carried hot fur, which could easily be burned. Perura and Percy decided to put a net on the floor. Perura said that it should be spread out right here. She was outraged by the fact that it stank very much. Giannatsia asked if it was sticky. Percy replied that of course. After all, it's resin. The girl sat down next to them and confirmed that the resin was indeed very sticky. Percy and Perura were unhappy. Perura was surprised to ask how Giannatsia managed to handle the resin. Gramel watched the children with surprise. Perura cringed and exclaimed that resin is a real mess and stinks even worse than glue. Gramel wondered if Giannatsia had used magic. She got up and said she was leaving and asked the others to keep their heads down. The stranger who had called for help earlier from Agredios asked her what she was talking about. She shouted that it was out of the question. And you can't do that. The girl said that if she was surrounded by wasps, she would be finished. Meanwhile, Agredios was trying to hide from the wasps. He's already used a red herring. The young man thought that it seemed that the wasps had bitten. Therefore, he managed to break away from them a little. The guy decided to jump over and saw that he was already almost next to the village. He hoped Grandma was already there. It has been called that since time immemorial. According to legends, a witch lives here. Agredios' father was a defender of Melamelian. By order of the king, he followed this land, and this duty was inherited. Suddenly, Agredios saw that there was also a man nearby. He couldn't figure out who was in front of him. The young man saw a man who was wearing a large protective helmet suit, and in his hands he had a net. He noticed that he recognized the sword that was in his hands. Agredios thought that, really, this is Grimmel. The young man quickly took the net that was in her hand and immediately threw it at the bees that flew to him. Thus, most of the swarm was trapped. Agredios was glad that he had finally managed to catch them. The young man continued to drag the net behind him so that he could catch as many bees as possible. He thought that the net was very heavy. Grimmel also helped him by swinging her sword. So they caught wasps with a net and resin. Agredios thought that if he skated like that, he would definitely crush everyone. So, after a while, Grimmel and Agredios caught all the wasps. The young man sat down on the ground. Both decided to take a break and sighed heavily from fatigue. Grimmel and Agredios took off their masks so that they could catch their breath freely. Grimmel gave the young man her hand so that he could get up. Agredios stood up with her help and immediately asked if the girl knew exactly how to bake bread. Grimmel looked at him in surprise. She asked why it was so important for him to know now. The girl wanted to continue and say the recipe, but the young man immediately interrupted her. The young man took the map in his hands to find the right way. He decided that the witch's lair must be somewhere nearby. After all, they say that when you pass close, you feel uncomfortable, and you can even lose consciousness. Agredios suggested to her, to begin with, to return back to the village. He said he thinks Grimmel has a lot of questions for him, and most likely the girl already knows what happened here. The young man said with all seriousness that they should discuss all this in a calm atmosphere. Grimmel agreed with his decision. After a while, they were greeted by Ganansisha, who was held by the hand of Perura and Percy, as well as a stranger whom they met in the afternoon. She immediately ran up to Butch. The girl was glad that poor Butch was back. He must have been too scared. She smiled broadly and shouted that she was very glad that Grimmel and Agredios were safe. All three of them started to hug towards them. Agredios said that he smells very strongly. Grimmel added that it was terrible. The young man thought that it was probably because the suit had not been washed since last week. Perura and Percy covered their noses from the smell. When everyone returned to the village, one of the men apologized for his negligent daughter. Grimmel asked someone to bring her water for the bath. Agredios said he would do everything now, so everyone decided to go to the sauna. Someone asked to close the door to the bathhouse, while another replied that it would be too dark. When everyone finally went inside, they felt an unpleasant smell and a strong stuffiness. Agredios replied that, in that case, the matter was settled. Everyone frowned, and Ganansisha screamed in horror. Grimmel asked why they were twitching so much. Everyone tried to make it as fast as possible so that you could safely stay in the bathhouse without discomfort, without suffocating in it. After a while, all the Agredios were sitting and enjoying the sauna. He talked about how pleased he was to be here. There was a man sitting next to him who also agreed with him. Perura and Percy were among them. Perura asked Ganansisha what had happened to her. Agredios thought that his mask should protect him, judging by the rumors. Although there was no evidence of this, the girl was sitting on the floor. She said her head had become too heavy. The children came closer to her. They took her by the hair. Perura said it was just for her hair. Percy added that they needed to be squeezed out. Ganansisha struggled to stand up. She felt the heavy weight of her hair. Perura asked if she could get up on her own. Percy said she would help her. The girl asked where her clothes were now. Grimmel replied that it was better not to take it off in the bathroom. That's how everyone ended up together. Ganansisha leaned on her elbows and put her long hair on the floor. At this time, Agredios and the children were having fun frolicking and splashing on the water. The young man took Perura and Percy by the arms and invited Ganansisha to go home and change clothes there. Grimmel asked for what purpose. The girl suggested that they go to the mill instead. Agredios asked her if she meant to blow her. On Grimmel's initiative, everyone turned out to be in front of the mill. The air blew pleasantly, so the clothes could dry faster, just like themselves. The children exclaimed joyfully as they felt very warm. Agredios said that Grimmel is just a genius. The girl suggested that everyone now stand sideways to dry as soon as possible. Ganansisha was a little scared when the air blew over her. Everyone was glad that they dried almost instantly. So a man and a woman, the parents of one of the girls, smiled. They said that it turns out that magic is very convenient. The man did not know that it could be used in this way. Their daughter came up to them and said she was very hungry. Agredios suggested that, in that case, she return back to the tavern. Suddenly, some noise was heard, and the guy immediately disappeared behind a tree. There were many unusual and unknown creatures in the Forbidden Forest. The guy looked at the children and asked them if they could cook something for everyone. They answered him positively. The young man thought that he should ask Ola's mother to teach him how to cook. The children joyfully took hold of Ganansisha's hair. Perura said that the girl was very nice, and Percy noticed that she looked just like a lamb. Grimel looked at Ganansisha carefully. She thought about how the girl's clothes had become the same again. Grimel called her brother Agredios and said she needed to ask something. At him, the young man turned around. The girl asked if everyone else was dead. The young man remained silent. Ramel immediately hugged him. She said she was very glad that her brother was able to stand it all with dignity. Agredios replied to her that it wasn't like that at all. The young man began stroking her head. Agredios added that he lost his temper, was desperate, and went berserk, running away to the Forbidden Forest. The young man tousled her hair. He noticed that Grimel was right about everything else, and she was not deceived by the merchants. Agredios asked how she, the Margrave's daughter, was allowed to leave the capital alone, unaccompanied. The girl began to straighten her hair. Agredios asked Grimel if everyone was already aware of what had happened here recently. Grimel replied that, and noticed that it was not worth waiting for their help at all. Agredios understood everything and said that he had to solve the problem of food first. Grimel agreed with him. The hunters confirmed that they had seen a witch nearby. Agredios looked around to see the source of the sound. Agredios decided to go on business. Grimel told him to wait, but the young man replied that they would discuss everything in the evening. In the meantime, he would go check on their supplies. Grimel wondered how the guy even came up with the idea of going to the Forbidden Forest. She looked to the side and noticed Ganansisha. Meanwhile, the children, husband and wife, and their daughter were sitting in the tavern. The woman asked if they had run out of food. She was at a loss. The woman said that only flour and peas remained. There is nothing else. That's why I had to cook pea soup. Everyone was sitting at the table and looked down sadly. Agredios frowned heavily and thought that things were very bad for them, and also that the merchants have not yet had time to replenish their stocks. The guy said that people can start already. He went into the warehouse and noticed that there were no vegetables, no fruits, not even dried fish left. And if there is nothing left in the village tavern, then, apparently, you will have to look for food in other people's houses. There is no other choice. Agredios wondered if it would last long. The young man sat down at the table and thought that they could only buy directly through the capital. Otherwise, they might consider that they had decided to go against the kingdom. Agredios wondered if he would have to personally go there and ask for help. The young man interrupted his thoughts and turned to Ganansisha. The girl looked at him questioningly. Agredios decided to remind her again how to eat properly. He told her that first she should take a spoon in the following way and scoop the soup with it, and then bring it to her mouth. The guy started showing her everything. He stopped with his hand on a tree and the city opened up in front of him. The guy thought that first he needed to appease his mother. He was extremely surprised, as it was the first time he had seen such a large minotaur. In front of him was a giant beast with horns that was walking through the forest. The guy thought that he would have to go around him very carefully. Ganansisha hesitantly took the spoon in her hand and began to repeat what Agredios was telling her. The hero noticed that the girl involuntarily used her magic, as roots began to sprout from her chair. Agredios thought with horror that he should have guessed that this would be the case. He turned around the chair where Grimel was sitting. The guy told her to sheathe her sword. Grimel asked him how he could trust her because she was a witch. The girl assumed that suddenly she would attack the children. Agredios told her to look at how Ganansisha got along well with them. Grimel asked how they could understand everything if they were just children. Meanwhile, they were teaching Ganansisha how to eat properly. Agredios said that despite the fact that she is a witch, they all owe her a lot. Grimel asked if Ganansisha hadn't destroyed their village. The guy replied that she was not to blame for what happened. After all, he just misunderstood the letter that his father wrote. The girl with the tied ponytails listened to their conversation and opened her mouth in surprise. Agredios took hold of his head and said that he pulled Ganansisha out of the forest by force and dragged her here. Grimel listened to him attentively. The young man looked at Ganansisha. The girl said that only a strong curse can defeat a curse. She began to use her magic, and the table was covered with dark energy. Ganansisha used her power to change the food. Agredios walked past the giant minotaur and noticed that there was a river very close by. Everyone covered their noses. Agredios thought about the stench of dead meat at the table. He couldn't understand what Ganansisha had done. The girl scooped up the food with a spoon and held out her hand. She said that this food would give him strength and strengthen his body. In all seriousness, Ganansisha told Agredios to accept her gift. The young man was horrified by what he had just heard. Ganansisha shouted at him to eat just a spoonful. Agredios thought that after he had forcibly kept her in the village, not allowing her to return to the forest, in her eyes, he was probably just terrible. Namely, he thought that she considered him a brutal murderer who attacked an innocent man. Ganansisha began to cry bitterly, and her body was trembling. She told the guy to try her gift now. But despite the fear, fighting the trembling in her hands, Ganansisha gathered all her courage into a fist, in order to avoid misunderstanding with Grimmel. And to pay tribute to Ganansisha's bravery, Agredios decided that he would take a chance. He thought that he should definitely taste this food with gratitude. The young man tasted the food with a spoon. Agredios frowned heavily and thought about how slimy it was after all. It stank of rotten meat. He thought maybe he should just swallow it, but decided it was better to chew it all up. The guy made a face at the unpleasant taste. He wondered if the peas were really there. Agredios decided that it was useless. It just slips between your teeth. Perua looked at the young man in surprise. She took a spoon and put it in Percy's mouth so that she could taste it too. He stopped and, taking off his mask, rinsed his face with water from the river. The guy thought he was right next to its riverbed, but the beast was not here. Grimmel was worried about this and immediately got up from her chair. She asked if Percy had eaten the food. The girl shouted at her to spit it out right away. Percy swallowed the food. Perura asked how she was feeling. The girl replied that it tasted like ordinary peas. The others listened to her in horror. Percy added that the peas are smelly but delicious. She smiled sweetly and ate more. Perura was very surprised and asked if it was true. She glanced at the girl who was sitting next to her. Both decided to give it a try. After eating a spoonful, they immediately stopped. They were terrified of the taste. Agredios asked Ganansisha if he had eaten this food. Would he be able to resist the curse of the Forbidden Forest? The girl looked at her spoon. She replied that the young man would not be able to. Agredios was very upset and lowered his head. Perura and the girl did not understand how Percy could enjoy the taste of this food. Ganansisha also said that once in a person's body, curses can mix and change, but the curses of filth can be washed away with water. The girl decided to try her own food and immediately spat it out. Grimmel and Agredios watched in horror. Grimmel was surprised that Ganansisha spat out her own food. Agredios put his hand over her mouth so she couldn't say anything. The girl with the ponytails apologized and asked what kind of curse Ganansisha was talking about, and if all the villagers had died because of it. Agredios decided to continue his journey. He put on his mask again and went further into the forest. Agredios said he would explain everything to them now. He replied that it was true. The curse of the Forbidden Forest has fallen on them. Only 3 survived. Agredios was left without the support of the capital, with small children in his arms. All day long, he thought about how not to starve to death. Everyone was shocked by what they heard from the guy. The young man continued and said that Ganansisha was able to cleanse all the bodies of filth. He was asked if the village was now free from the curse. Agredios thanked the girl and apologized to her once again for everything. The man at the table asked what happened to them. After all, the village of Agredis, which is located by the river, was attacked by a huge herd of minotaurs, and they had to get out of there as soon as possible to escape. He tried to take the elderly, women, and children away to the city. His daughter shouted that suddenly, out of nowhere, that living hive appeared. She said that his father decided to distract him so that they could escape. The girl took her head in her hands and declared with horror that even though they had chased away the bees, they could still return. Agredios told the girl not to worry too much, since they cut off the uterus's head. She asked him if it was true. The man asked if he was joking. Another girl also asked if Grimmel was a huntress and if Agredios was a knight. The young man apologized. and introduced himself to them as Agredios, the eldest son of Margrave Auremelion. The girl introduced herself as his sister, Grimal. The girl with the ponytails was surprised. The man asked them not to be angry with their daughter. His wife took her daughter by the head and tilted her to greet Agredios, and told her not to dare to talk to a nobleman like that. The young man felt that the witch was very close. He clenched his hand into a fist and was determined to find her, no matter what. The young man was surprised. He told them not to worry so much, since he grew up among the people. So the guy asked them to communicate with him on equal terms. He invited them to introduce themselves as well. The children gave their names. Ganansisha also introduced herself. The man bowed, calling himself Wap. The woman's name was Navi, and the girl's name was Ula. She raised her hand and said she was from Akines. Agredios wondered if they would stay here if they were given land. He said that these were difficult times, so their help would be very helpful. Grimal asked him to make his face simpler. The young man apologized. Ola noticed that they had absolutely nothing to eat except peas. The girl smiled broadly and decided to invite everyone to go to the giant hive so that they could collect honeycombs. She noticed that he was just a storehouse of selected honey. The girl added that her father had said so. She asked him if it was true. Wap said that usually, in order to burn a nest of wild bees, even arable land has to be sacrificed. After that, there's not much left. Ola happily replied that in this case, you should even go. Perura and Percy were very happy to hear that. The girl suggested to them that she run away. Ula immediately fell to the floor and lowered her head. The children looked at her in surprise. Agredios called out to her and asked the others what had happened to her. Wap smiled and replied that everything was fine with her. He said that Ola fell asleep just like a puppet whose strings had been cut. It happens to her a lot. Wap picked her up to pick her up and added that he sent her running forward because she was very nimble. Suddenly, the hero found that a witch with long black hair that reached all the way to the ground was standing in front of him. No wonder she was so tired after running all day. Agredios said she was doing well and added that if there were monsters around, they could pose a serious threat. Young man, let's ask them to solve everything tomorrow. And today it's better to get a good night's sleep. He told them to stay in the guest room. Wap put his daughter on his shoulder and asked if they could stay at the nobleman's house. The guy answered positively. Grimal said she would clear the table. Navi replied that she could handle it herself. Percy said that the clean water is in that place. Wap replied that he would gladly accept any offer from Agredios. He thanked him. The man noticed that his family was safe and sound thanks to the young man. Nell said that her younger brother lives in the capital and he needs to be informed as soon as possible that they are alive. Later, Agredios told them to follow him. They asked him where they could put Butch. The guy replied that there was also a stable here. You can put a Grimel next to the horse. So the night came. Grimel was reading the letter. Agredios complained that his father had written him only a page. He was surprised that the girl was already 3. The guy asked what he had written. Grimel smiled. She asked him what he thought was written there. The girl said that her father had repeated 10 times that she did not need to hurry to get married. Her father wrote that her brother was a fool. He would disappear completely without her. Finally, he said that Grimel got married early and would still have time. The girl looked at Agredios and said that now they are all considered lepers and the lands are desecrated. Grimel couldn't tell Navi that now all the way to the capital is definitely closed to them. Agredios replied that it was a shame, but such a decision was understandable. He was surprised that he had suddenly found her. Agredios decided to arm himself with armor. He put protection on his right arm. Grimel said that, rather, she was acting recklessly, but she really needed to get married. After all, this is the only way to gain a foothold in the capital. It doesn't matter for whom, as long as you get support. Agredios frowned heavily and looked at her. He asked her if she had forgotten what was said in the letter. The guy said that the enraged father would chase him with an axe if he didn't stop her. Grimel did not answer him. Agredios said that they would have to ensure that the quarantine was lifted, and he wanted to fulfill his father's last wish as well. But the young man wants to hear voices and children's laughter again. He wants to finally mourn his father and mother, and the others. Therefore, he definitely cannot cope without Grimel. Agredios asked her for help. He smiled and asked the girl to stay. The guy said that he was worried about what would happen if the capital did not accept refugees from the nonsense. In any case, they had no choice. Otherwise, they would have starved to death. Agredios said they would go to Akinis as soon as they got the honey. We need to help them to establish their way of life first. He was wondering what if no one was sent to help them from the capital at all. Agredios could provide homes for those who had nowhere else to go. You can also try to buy food through nonsense. This way, they will have at least some kind of connection with the capital. The guy decided that now they would have a very difficult time. Graemel asked when they would be able to arrange a funeral for their father and mother. Suddenly, someone screamed. Graemel and Agredios immediately left the room. They saw the Persian come up to the room and started crying loudly. The children were screaming and asking where their mom and dad were. The hero also took a sword and drew it to prepare to strike. Agredios ran towards her to attack the witch first. Graemel knelt down and hugged them tightly. She kissed each girl on the forehead. Graemel tried to calm the children down. They fell asleep, and the girl took them in her arms. Graemel asked Agredios to hang up the wet clothes while she changed the children into her old clothes. Ganansisha opened the door and shouted, looking straight into Graemel's eyes. The girl walked past her and didn't even pay any attention to it. Agredios thought that she had stopped being afraid of Ganansisha and picked up the children, who weighed 40 kilos, as if they were fluff. The young man thought that she took after her father. Ganansisha looked out and looked after Graemel. She said the children were crying and they were cold. Agredios was spreading out the bed. He said that when you wake up from urinating in your sleep and realize that your father and mother are gone, it's really a terrible feeling. An unbearable longing and despair immediately engulfs him. The guy said it was probably for the best to some extent. Ganansisha was watching him. Agredios added that they needed to cry themselves out. He hopes that they will understand that their parents are no longer around. The children have only them. Agredios, Graemel, Ganansisha. Graemel called Agredios and said that she would sleep with the children today. The girl sat down next to them and looked at them. Ganansisha came over and lay down between the children. Graemel was surprised by this. She looked at Agredios, who gestured to her that everything was fine. Graemel sighed and lay down next to Percy. Suddenly, she heard sounds behind her and turned around. Looking at her, Agredios thought that she looked just like a human. Agredios thought that he did not want to be a count at all. Instead, he wants to be a knight who would protect this world. The next day, the children wet themselves again. They were very ashamed, and they pressed their faces against Ganansisha, as they felt uncomfortable. Agredios told Perura not to worry so much, since in childhood they often had this happen to Graemel. The girl sighed with fatigue. Later, Agredios gathered everyone in the tavern and asked for a moment's attention. He suggested that everyone go get honey. The guy said that he relies on them in this case. He asked if they had everything they needed for this. Wab replied that they would do everything, put on protective suits and open the bee nest. So also, a hammer, chisel, saw, wooden box, boards with nails, will not be superfluous. Ula asked her father where they should put the honeycomb. Wap replied that this was a very good question. He asked Agredios if they could use his land temporarily. The young man replied positively. Wap said that then he would go to build an apiary. He decided that he could use some help and thought about who he should take with him, Ulu or Navi. Perura and Percy shouted that they had helped him. Wap said he was counting on them. Wap asked Navi if she would open the nest. The woman replied that Ula should help her with this. The young man decided that he needed to pierce her heart as quickly as possible. Agredios tried to stab her with a knife. Ganansisha and Graemel stood nearby and watched everyone else. Ganansisha looked at the girl and decided to take her hand. Graemel wondered if Ganansisha liked holding hands. Ganansisha was watching her closely. Ula climbed on top of Butch and told her parents that everything she needed was here. She thought that they could handle it on their own. Agredios thought about it. Ola happily told Bucci to go ahead. Everyone wished her a safe journey. The young man asked Navi if they had an apiary in Ashini's, and if they had ever extracted honey from wild bees. She replied that they didn't have to do it. Navi put on a protective suit and said that from the book she was given, she knows a lot about bees. Ola smiled and said that her family has been keeping an apiary for several generations. In addition, they grow flowers and make pesticides out of them. Nell added that they did not help against the invasion of bees. She couldn't imagine how the two of them could even defeat such a monster. Ula replied that it was better to see once than to hear 100 times. Agredios said they had already arrived. They saw a dead wasp in front of them. Agredios wanted to tell how he killed her with a reconciliation, but he was told to stop. Navi was surprised by the size of the wasp. Ula shouted that she would eat the bear too. He got closer to the house and decided that he could get into her office from the backyard. Therefore, the young man walked around the house and also climbed over the fence to get there. It seemed as if the witch's shell was disappearing somewhere. She shouted loudly and pushed the young man away. Agredios immediately fell to the ground. She noticed that the wasp had a terrible mouth. The girl was told that if saliva gets on her, then all the bees will immediately flock to the area. Agredios was asked if he had been bitten. He replied that only the bracers were damaged. The guy said with regret that they were made to order. Navi put on a protective helmet and said that she couldn't delay any longer. There are no bees in sight yet, but it's better to stay away. Agredios took a hammer and hit it to make the honeycomb appear. Navi took off her helmet and said that she seemed to have been blown away. There were only drones and kids here. They wouldn't sting. Ula decided to treat the bees with a repellent. Navi decided to pull out the honeycomb. Agredios was surprised because they were in the shape of a fan, and all because they were attached to a round body. The woman said that the honeycomb is very heavy, which means that the honey will be thick. She handed the boxes to Agredios. He noticed that they were really quite heavy and asked if they needed to be carried to the cart. Navi responded positively. She immediately called Ulu. The girl looked out. Navi told the young man to collect the surplus in a jar so that nothing would be lost. Agredios was surprised when he saw the bees. He wondered if it was a swarm and what the bees had flocked to. He became interested. The guy saw how Ula's face was covered in bees. He was amazed by what he saw and immediately called Navi to come to them. He took one of the calling devices he had and threw it right at the witch. There was a loud sound, and the witch began to burn. The woman asked what the commotion was. Agredios replied that bees were all over the Ulu. Navi reported that she usually has fun like this and will get a scolding from her later. The guy didn't understand what was going on. Ola smiled and said that this was how it was planned, because wild bees have an aromatic pouch. She had heard that bees were coming to him. Ola decided to check it out right away. Gremmel asked if she was afraid of being stung. Ola replied that they were such cuties and would not be able to do it. One of the bees landed on her nose. Ula almost sneezed. She said they have fresh honey now. The girl invited them to try it, and they all scooped up a spoonful. Agredios said it was very tasty, and the children would certainly be very happy. The guy was surprised when he saw that Ula's lip was swollen and rashes appeared on her face from a bee sting. He asked if she was feeling pain right now. Ula replied that she was in a lot of pain. Ganansesha decided to use her magic on her. Ula was surprised that everything went away immediately. The girl touched her face. She joyfully took Ganansesha's hands and thanked her for healing her. Nabi said it was time for them to return. Ula came up holding a honeycomb in her hands and said that there were a lot of kids here. There was no need to leave them. Agredios asked if they ate larvae. Ula replied that yes, because they are delicious in any form. Navi realized what she had been feeding her all the time. Ula ran forward and told Navi that she was going to get a repellent. Agredios frowned heavily and thought that, for sure, nothing had happened to her, because witches are immortal, and this is quite convenient for them. He took one of the ropes with a hook. The woman said that Ula just took them and left them. Agredios asked if he needed to dial more. Navi replied that it was not worth it. Everyone went back to the tavern. The children waved happily and shouted that they had finally returned. Ula told them to take the honeycomb, then cut off the head and sting, and also do not forget to tear off the wings. The children immediately got to work. Agredios was surprised and wanted to ask if Ula would use the larvae too. The girl smiled and said that now was not the time to be picky. Gremmel told Agredios to eat whatever he was given. The children gave honey to the young man so that he could taste it. Agredios thanked them. Ganansesha touched Grimmel's arm. Grimmel asked if she was thanking her with this gesture. She looked at her carefully. Grimmel apologized to her for not being able to thank her. After all, Ganansesha cured Ulu, and she is very grateful to her. Grimmel said that people say thank you when they are made happier, or when, on the contrary, they are overwhelmed with sadness. The girl smiled and took Ganansesha's hand. She said she never said thank you to her. Grimmel thanked the girl for taking care of her parents and the villagers. Ganansesha was confused. Evening came. Ola told everyone that lunch was ready and fried honeycombs with salt, pea soup with baby, white bread with honey, as well as larvae were served, and threw it right at her. Meanwhile, another bomb was about to explode. Agredios asked the witch how she could do this to them. Navi said that if you don't want to, then it's better not to eat, because even they didn't eat anything like that. Not like noble people. Agredios said he would eat, because Ola praised these dishes. It is unlikely that something will be worse than yesterday's peas. The guy said that even though he is a margrave, he is still without power. That is, in fact, he is an ordinary youth. He thought that thanks to their ingenuity, the table had become overflowing with food. Therefore, they were very pleased to join Navi and Ula. Agredios and Gremel thanked him. Ula and Navi began to pray, saying that they were grateful that God had sent them this food. Agredios wondered if there were many believers in Ashanis. He didn't know what to do since he had never eaten bugs. But it was too late to back out now. The young man looked at the children, who were eating their food with gusto. He asked how everything tasted to them. Perura said that the larvae are very sweet and crunchy, like shrimp. Percy added that the peas and bees just burst in your mouth. Ganansisha also ate with great pleasure. Agredios thought they really looked like shrimp. He asked if they had eaten them before. Wap replied that he did not, since seafood comes to them already in dried form. Ol was also very tasty. Everyone noticed that the bread was also very appetizing and fresh. Ola said it was even better than the rye buns. He talked about how his parents raised him, and she took it all and destroyed it. Smoke from the fire appeared around her, and she couldn't see anything around her. The rope that the young man threw wrapped around the witch's neck, squeezing her hard. Agredios thought it was no wonder that those who live far away are not attracted to such fruit at all. And Percy and Perur are the opposite. The young man decided to try the larva and convince himself that it was just shrimp. He felt that they were crispy and sweet and sour. Agredios said it was very tasty. Ola smiled and told them to also try the bread, which seemed to melt in their mouths. Granel said that honey is very sweet and fragrant. Agredios added that he should have trusted Ula's taste more. Ola said that she had already talked about it and suggested that he go again for honey. Navi slapped her on the back of the head and asked where her manners were. Perura deftly butchered the larvae because they look like shrimp. The process is almost the same. Percy told Ganansisha that even though her peas stink, she still wants more. Ula told Navi to try some more bread. The woman agreed. Everyone enjoyed their meal. Percy thanked Ganansisha for the meal. Later, Agredios mounted his horse, saying that he would scout the situation in Ashanes with Ula. He asked Grimel to keep an eye on everything. Ola asked her father to collect the remaining children from the bee house. They both set off. Ula sat behind Agredios on a horse. She was surprised that he was very fast. The young man told her not to bite her tongue. The horse will drive them to nonsense in half a day. Agredios continued and said he would never forget the 552 people she had killed so mercilessly. He was filled with intense rage and anger. Later, Ula said that the village should soon appear over the hill. She pointed her finger and asked if it was smoke. The guy said they needed to climb higher and asked the girl to hold on tight. Agredios stopped. He was very worried and took a telescope to see what was in the distance. Ula jumped off her horse and said that she did not want such an outcome for nonsense. The girl sat down on the ground and shouted what it was all about. Agredios frowned and thought that it was definitely the work of humans. After a while, they returned to the tavern. Ula immediately rushed to her mother and shouted that her grandfather's book and indeed everything in their village had burned to the ground. Wab asked Agredios if anyone else was hurt. The guy replied that no, it didn't look like there were people there. The man replied that it was good, apparently it was God's will. He stroked Ulu's head and said that life goes on. Navi added that the king would not leave them in trouble. The young man said that Ula's mother was right and asked her to rest. Agredios knocked on the table and told Gremel that someone had obviously burned down the village. He also saw the church banner, but couldn't tell Wap about it. Gremel replied that it was all the better she felt better. It is good that the refugees have bypassed their village. The girl is sure that the church will protect them. He thought about all the people who died and about his family. The young man shouted loudly that the witch would definitely pay for what she had done to all of them. He promised her that he would make her go through the same things she had done to them. The guy asked who they should buy food from and how much they had left. Grimel was pulling food out of the oven and replied that there was enough for 8 people for 6 months. Agredios smiled and said that he loved Grimel very much. The girl did not answer him and immediately threw a glove in his face. The young man asked if his love would remain unrequited. Grimel said she spent the whole day with Ganansisha. The guy noticed that she was acting like a child. Grimel asked what Agredios had done to her in the forest that day. He hesitantly began to say that there were no traces left on it. He cut her up, set her on fire, and strangled her. Grimel was very surprised. Agredios lowered his head as he was ashamed. He added that he suspected her of being a witch. Grimel said she was no better than him. After all, she called Ganansisha a witch. The girl asked if the guy had noticed Ganansisha's facial expressions. Grimel noticed that she was trying to imitate them in this. Agredios said that he was very embarrassed now. Grimel handed him the box. The guy asked what was in it. The girl replied that it was a thing that should atone for their guilt to Ganansisha, as well as give her a smile. These are my mother's boots, and on the tray there is tea and cookies that Grimel baked. She asked Agredios not to forget to put honey in the tea. Agredios held his sword ready to pierce the witch again. Meanwhile, she lay exhausted on the floor and tried to come to her senses. Grimel left the room and said that she had invited her to the garden in advance so that no one would interfere with them. The guy wanted to stop her so that the girl would give him some advice. Grimel told him not to put too much pressure on her and to make his face simpler. After that, the girl left the room. Agredios said he understood everything and would try not to make a mistake. Grimel wished him luck in the end. Ganansisha was sitting at a table in the garden. She saw that Agredios was walking towards her, holding a tray and a box in his hands. She immediately screamed in fear. The young man poured her chamomile tea and said that Grimel had baked cookies especially for her. He asked if he could join her. Ganansisha was very scared. She sniffed the mug of tea and decided to have a drink. The girl said that he helps to remove the conspiracy, as well as cleanse the body. Agredios tried to smile. He asked her why this curse had killed the villagers. The girl drank tea and said that a big distortion had arisen, which amazed people. The forest forces life and death to quickly replace each other. The distortions continue to accumulate, and the wind blows them away. Agredios thought it was a bad thing. Still, he is clearly not strong in metaphors. The guy decided that he would let her get used to the conversation. He asked if this was not the first time such a wind was rising. Suddenly, the witch fell from the tree she was on. The hero backed away, sword in hand. He heard the witch asking him why he was being so cruel to her. Ganansisha said that the first time she saw only smoke. She took the cookies carefully. The girl said that she was walking once and decided to climb higher. And then when the wind blew, she suddenly saw smoke. She was curious about what might be there. She had been watching all of them for a long time. Agredios frowned heavily and thought about how he could do this to her. Ganansisha continued to devour the cookies with gusto. The young man blamed himself for mistaking her for a witch. He was afraid to imagine how lonely she had been all this time. Ganansisha ate too fast that she almost choked. Agredios thought to himself that he had to keep smiling no matter what, and keep himself in control. He offered her a sip of tea because they still need her alive. The girl dropped the cup and her eyes widened in surprise. She asked if they could all die if the wind blew again. Agredios said he wouldn't let anyone die. He said that Ganansisha had saved them and it wasn't all in vain. The young man began to open the box. He said that people can be connected by different things. Fate and words. Perura and Percy, for example, learned to fish from their parents. Agredios asked Ganansisha to become a part of the family. He pulled out his boots and asked her to stretch out her leg. The young man put boots on her. Agredios decided to ask this question again. He asked if Ganansisha was willing to go on with their lives. The girl looked at him in surprise. Agredios felt very tired. He shouted at the witch to get up now and continue fighting with him. Meanwhile, she continued to ask the young man why he was doing this to her. She hugged her legs to her chest. The guy said that no one else knows about the curse of the forest except her, and therefore, only she can teach other people to resist it. The girl said that it was Agredios who gave her the name Ganansisha. The guy asked her again, because he didn't remember it at all. He was thinking that wasn't how she had originally introduced herself to Percy and Perura. The girl began to cry bitterly and said that Agredios had screamed at her in the forest. The young man remembered when it was. maybe at the moment when he attacked her in the woods. Agredios thought deeply about her name and decided to find out everything. The young man recalled how he furiously shouted that the girl would pay for everything she had done. Agredios didn't understand how he could do this to her. He shouted that the girl had misunderstood everything and began to apologize to her. The guy was very ashamed that he had said such a thing. It's not her name at all. The girl said she was leaving only half of it. Agredios asked what it all meant. She sat down on the floor and said that the voice that called her filled her. It was a human voice that called her Setia. The girl shouted loudly and pointed her fingers at the guy. She said she hated him. Agredios knelt down and said he was really sorry. The girl took the cookies again and added that if everyone disappeared, she would no longer be able to be a Setia. The hero took the bird with him to eat it with his family for lunch. He thought that the prey was what it needed, namely fat and big. The witch started screaming and asking him the same question, namely, why the guy is doing all this. There was despair and pain in her eyes, and she began to cry. She said she didn't want that at all, because she wanted to live with all of them. The girl put her head on the table. Agredios held out his arms to her and smiled broadly. He thanked the girl and called her Setia. The girl threw one cookie into his hands. Agredios thought that it was unlikely that the girl was imitating him, because he definitely did not have the same look as she did now. He said thank you to her. The young man added that now everyone would be happy to get to know her again. Setia smiled sweetly back at him. Agredios said he was glad to see the girl and invited her to their settlement. Setia chuckled and added that it would be better if the young man said it again tomorrow. Agredios hoped that the girl was smiling more sincerely and not just imitating him. He said that Setia was right, and it was really late. The guy added that he had had enough of gatherings and offered to go to bed. Agredios said he would escort Setia to her room. The girl said that she needed to go to Grimmel and called her. Meanwhile, there were people in armor in the territory of Aconis who set fire to it. One of them told the others to burn everything in their path, both houses and people. Someone said that Taros is still chasing refugees from Achines. Another ordered that no one retreat and drive people to Melian to burn all the refugees. Exhausted people were leaving their homes as a large fire started. Everyone was depressed and didn't know what would happen next. Agredios was discouraged. He was very surprised when he heard that the witch, it turns out, can talk. He noticed that she spoke the same language as his mother, father, and all people in general. The young man wondered how this could even be. Agredios threw the rope at her again. He used it to pull the witch in and tighten it. She screamed in horror and covered her face with her hand. Agredios moved closer to her. He looked the witch straight in the eye. The hero was full of rage and asked her why she destroyed his village. The witch was trembling with fear. She closed her eyes and continued to cry, saying she didn't know why she did it. The enraged Agredios took her by the neck with both hands and began to strangle her. The witch started screaming because she was out of breath. The young man asked her why she decided to leave the forest. The witch replied that she did it because the wind blew. She was about to continue, but Agredios released her and roughly threw her to the ground. He added that the witch would now have to go to the village with him. Agredios told her to go ahead of him. The guy warned the witch that if she did something, he would certainly kill her. The witch sighed in pain and barely got up from the ground. Meanwhile, Agredios took his backpack and put the weapons he was using in it. The guy looked in the window and frowned. It seemed strange to him that his mother had not been there yet, since she was usually always here. The hero decided that, most likely, something had happened. The witch's legs did not obey, and it was very difficult for her to keep her balance. That's why, as soon as she stood up, she immediately fell to the ground. Agredios looked at her and warned her that if she didn't go with him right now, she would kill her right away. The witch screamed in despair. She replied that she just couldn't get up. As soon as the witch said that, she noticed the rope that was wrapping around her body. She was tied up and started screaming. The witch started fidgeting and trying to get out. She begged the young man to stop all this. The witch screamed that she was very hot and at the same time cold and unpleasant. Agredios tied her to his backpack and began to carry the witch on his back. He asked her to calm down at last, because otherwise the monsters would notice them. During the journey, the young man thought that in all this time no one had shown up yet. Agredios suggested that it was most likely because he was with a witch right now. So, during their journey, night had already fallen, and a crescent moon appeared. But Agredios continued to walk, despite his extreme fatigue. So he came to the village. The day came, and it became much sunnier. The young man recalled how he came to it some time ago and was joyfully greeted by cheerful children. Everyone was alive and happy. Now, Agredios looked around and saw that all the people nearby were dead. The city was almost completely deserted, and there was not a single soul. The guy leaned out of the window and shouted to his mother that he was Agredios, her son, and had already returned home. He also noticed that he had brought a good catch with him, which he wanted to give to his father. The guy freed the witch. She was trembling with fear. Agredios asked her who had done all this to the village if not her. After all, according to the witch, she has nothing to do with it at all. She raised her hand and pointed towards the forest. The witch looked into the guy's eyes and said, "It was all about him. The forest was cursed." Agredios frowned. He clutched his head in disbelief. The hero asked the witch what exactly she meant by that. The witch continued and said that all this was just the beginning, as many more things in the future would be cursed. Agredios looked at her with extreme surprise and asked why everything had turned out this way. The witch replied that it was only an appearance of death. The earth is rotten, the rivers are dry, the wind has died down. Trees, grass and flowers are all infected. She sat down on the ground next to one child and put her hand on his head. Agredios asked her if this could happen again in other cities, and if there was any way to prevent it. With the help of her powers, the witch summoned the staff, and before that she recited a spell. She stood up and touched the child's body with it, which was lying on the ground. Meanwhile, his body began to gradually disappear. Agredios looked at it in horror and asked what she had just done. The witch replied to him that death was in the air, namely here and everywhere. But all this is just an illusion. Agredios wondered how he could just believe her words. The young man shouted that he wanted to roast the prey in the evening. He thought that for sure his father would meet him and tell him, so that he could do better. But the hero does not miss the hunt when he pleases. Namely, the way she said that their bodies do not decompose, they are not pecked by birds, and that this is not death at all. The young man was looking at the dead girl who was lying on the ground in front of him. He added that he knows absolutely nothing about the curse, but he has something to say. Agredios wants to collect all the corpses in one place. The guy was thinking that this forest had desecrated his people. At this time, the witch was standing in front of him, trembling with fear. The young man wanted to collect all the corpses nearby. He offered the witch to help their souls pass away. She agreed. Agredios sighed from extreme fatigue. He immediately began to move the corpses so that they were all in one place. Basically, the young man put them near the walls of houses. So he decided to stop for a little rest. It was very difficult for the young man, and he was very tired. At this time, Agredios began to reminisce. So, the young man remembered how, as a child, he smiled happily and approached his parents to show off his culinary skills. He recalled how his father was happy that he had caught and cooked a pheasant on his own for the first time. He told Agredios that he should become his successor in the future. The man believed that his son should hone some more skills. Agredios' mother and father noticed that he talked a lot about it. But when they tasted his dish, they immediately said that it was really very tasty. Both were smiling and enjoying their meal. Agredios noticed how his father did not stop and ate all the food he had prepared. It was very pleasant for him to remember that carefree time, or something like that. Agredios called out to his parents once more, but there was still no response. He looked carefully at the corridor, which was empty. Agredios remembered how his mother worried and watched as his father did not stop and, in the end, ate his son's portion into the bargain. And then he looked at Agredios with extreme surprise, as he did not expect such an outcome at all. At such moments, the man felt ashamed. Nevertheless, Agredios always smiled broadly and was very joyful. His parents were by his side. The mother stroked her son's head, and the father held him tightly by the shoulder. The hero sat down on the ground between his father and mother, holding a letter in his hands. He read how in a letter, his father asked the young man to make sure to feed other people tasty in honor of their funeral. Agredios lowered his head and turned to the witch with an aching heart. He asked her to bury her parents for him. The witch cast a spell and pointed her staff in their direction. Agredios asked her to give them a beautiful funeral. Meanwhile, the young man was holding both parents' hands. He turned to them in his mind and said that he would definitely hear his father grumbling again. and they will definitely taste fried poultry with their whole family. So their bodies disappeared. Agredios was in great pain. He was extremely depressed. The witch stared at him intently and did not say a word. The hero didn't say anything. He kept his head down. The witch decided to ask the young man if what she had already done for him was enough. Agredios painfully replied positively to her. He sat up. The witch still felt tense and afraid around him. Setia, Grimel, Perura, and Percy are sleeping peacefully in a small bed. The children have spread out the blanket and are hugging Setia, and Grimel has just woken up and does not quite understand what is happening. Wop is worried. He informs my lord Agredios that these newly arrived people definitely came from a genie's. Wop also says that he asked the refugees what is happening in that area now, and learned something very important. Standing in the middle of the street, Agredios hands his sister her sword, while he asks her to keep an eye on Perura and keep an eye on Perura. Next, he asks Ulu to bring oxen, and he tells the rest of the people that they need to drain the blood from the carcass before it coagulates. Together, people place large logs under the monster's carcass and wrap the horns with several ropes. Spreading out around him, they pull the carcass together to move it to the cutting. One of the people of nonsense, standing near the bull, informs Sir Agri that in order to properly carve this large carcass, it is necessary to hang it, drain the blood, and skin it. Frightened, Seisha hid behind Ula and grabbed her by the shoulder. She is staring at something and is silent. Ula calls her name questioningly, but gets no answer. Agredios, following Setia's gaze, explains that she should not worry because this is not a fire. They just built a big bonfire for the bull. And then Setia, looking at the smiling Ulu, also began to smile. Standing next to the bull, which people have finally moved to the right place, and pointing at it with his hand, Agredios asks Setia if she can lift the carcass of the bull so that people can do the butchering. Setia listened to the request of Agredios, and, looking over Ula's shoulder, hesitantly asks him what people are going to eat the carcass of a bull. The happily smiling Lord Agredios informs the witch Setia that of course people will eat the bull, and the delicious dinner is waiting for all of them today. Then Setia squatted down and, closing her eyes, put her hand to the ground as if activating her powers and directing the roots of plants from the ground to the carcass of the bull Taurus. The magic of the witch Setia worked perfectly, and the carcass of the bull rose, which allowed the blood to drain from the carcass. People around are mesmerized by the work of the network. A very frightened Wop squeezed his eyes shut. A shadow of despair lay on his face, and informs my lord Agredios that these people were met with bows at the ready, and that none of the refugees were even allowed near the capital. The surrounding people began to talk happily that the bull was very big and that they had to figure out what to do with the giblets. Everyone wants to help in this matter and grab a piece for themselves. Someone will run for the cart, and someone will help with the giblets. The children also want to help and offer Agredios to run for herbs, because it's spring outside and not only watercress is green. Agredios does not mind, but asks them not to run far away. He is glad that they are smiling again, and that they will finally have a proper meal. Looking at the incision on the carcass of the bull, Ula snorts that the heart of the bull was fried. To which Agredios replies that this is possible, because during the battle Grimelda pierced the monster's body with her flaming sword. Agredios takes a small knife and carefully cuts off a small piece from the heart of the bull and says that it would be necessary to try it. He pulled a piece of meat into his mouth, but couldn't bite into it. Suddenly, the face of Agredios was distorted with extreme surprise and darkened, which caused surprise in Ula. He suddenly says strangely that she will be younger than him and that she should taste the meat. Agredios reached out and put a small piece into Ul's mouth, cut off from the heart of the bull pierced by Grimelda's flaming sword. She obediently begins to chew the meat, but she doesn't like something about it. Contrary to Agredios' expectations, the meat from the bull's heart turned out to be tasteless. Ula scrunches up her displeased face and snorts. The meat has blood in it, and it tastes like burnt rice and burnt leaves. Ula continues to whine, shouting that the meat is too tough and she can't chew it. And anyway, her jaw is already jammed. Agredios looks at her in shock and is silent. Agredios thought about it. He curses and doesn't know what to do now. If even Ula couldn't chew the meat, then others definitely won't be able to. Ula offers to chop the meat into minced meat, and Agredios is very happy. Then both the elderly and the children will be able to chew the meat. And then someone's voice is heard saying that their knife does not take meat. The news that Agredios had just heard from Vappa had thrown him into obvious shock. Agredios knows that the church is forbidden to have its own army, and this can only mean one thing, and this knowledge does not please Agredios. It turned out that the bull has too thick a layer of fat, and the craftsmen say that they do not need a knife, but a saw. Otherwise, they will carve the carcass for 2 days. Satya is looming somewhere behind at this time. Agredios is shocked. If 2 days are only for cutting, then how much will it take to prepare the minced meat? He worries that everything will rot and does not know how to save the extracted meat of a huge bull. Ula's mother, Navi, asks Agredios if he really wants to keep the whole carcass. And someone behind me is loudly calling my grandmother and waving at her. One of the Achilles introduced her grandmother to Lord Agri, saying that she was the real queen of pickles. Agri is very happy and thinks it sounds promising. He asks the old lady if she can help them. They have a lot of salt, but little time. The old lady advises to boil a lot of water, add salt and put the meat there. And you can also add saltpeter, herbs, and wine. And you will need to find barrels. Lord Agredios wondered if the salted meat would become softer. He is not sure about this, but he is not discouraged and believes that he will come up with something. He just needs more time. The witch Setia, who also looms near people, looks at people uncomprehendingly and asks Ula what they are doing there. Ula points his finger at the men working with the carcass of the bull and tells Setia that they want to salt the meat so that it does not spoil longer. Ula spat out a piece of meat, which she was still trying to chew, and complains to Setia that the meat is terribly tough and would like to make it softer somehow. Suddenly, Setia grabbed a piece from Ula's hand. Ula screams at Setia to throw away this meat because she just spat it out of her mouth and that she doesn't need to eat it. Meanwhile, Wap continues to tell my lord Agredios about what he heard from the refugees. They reported that soldiers blocked the road to the capital and wrote on a sign that all refugees should get out until they were stuck with arrows like hedgehogs. Ula grabbed Setia, trying to stop her from eating this piece, but she just started blowing on it, raising clouds of some kind of smoke around. Seeing this, Agredios screamed in horror. He is terrified that the story of the pea soup will repeat itself. Then only Percy liked it. But she will eat anything. The strange steam blown by the witch enveloped the carcass of the bull and the people who stood around it, including Agredios, from all sides. Agredios does not understand what happened and what the witch did. It looks like the outside is covered with some kind of lint. Agredios, looking at his palm where a piece of meat was trembling, he suddenly realized that it was very similar to mold. Agredios, of course, has heard about cheese with mold, but something confuses him. He asks Setia if it will make it easier to chew meat. She nods affirmatively. Agredios is sickened because what he holds looks like a lump of mold, but he is ready to believe Setia. Ula looks at him in shock. Closing his eyes, Agredios quickly put a piece of meat with mold in his mouth because he believes Setia. Ula gaped in shock, and Setia clenched her fists. Suddenly, Agredios realized something. Wrinkling her nose, Agri realizes that the meat tastes like leather shoes that he forgot to dry in the summer. He feels sick again, and Ula, terrified, is already giving him water. Agri knelt down exhausted. This meat is impossible to eat. But Seisha calmly swallowed a piece of raw meat, which he is surprised at because she is not particularly used to any kind of food at all. Agredios, hearing this, leaned wearily against the wall. He raised his hand to his head and asked Wap if the refugees were really threatened by a royal detachment of soldiers. Wap, continuing to stand in front of my lord, replies that the refugees themselves told him so. And then Seisha points to the carcass and asks them to cut not where they are now, but below. They are surprised, but suddenly realize that the blade has entered the meat more easily. One of the craftsmen who cut the meat noted that it has become much drier and is now cut as if easier. It dawned on Agredios, and he clapped his hands. He realized that the meat remained edible under the mold and would rot more slowly. Setia, making incomprehensible movements with her fingers, explains to him that one curse slows down the effect of other curses. Lord Agredios, listening attentively to her explanation, beamed. He thinks it's even better than he expected. Lord Agri asks people to cut off the mold with fat and cut into pieces only that part of the meat that will go into food today. They agree. and he will burn the scraps so that wild animals do not run away. Agredios saw a horseman on a hillock. This is his sister. He waves to her and calls her by name. When Grimelda dismounted, he asks her to make a fire and then they will go to the tavern together. Walking beside him, his sister asks him if he is injured, to which he replied that he actually ran under the hooves of the bull. And when the joy of victory began, he realized that his back was hurting. Suddenly he remembered something, and looked at his sister as if he wanted to say something. Agredios slapped her on the back of the head, asking why she wasn't looking up. She needed to be more careful. She replies that she saw everything. And in response, he asked why she did not evade. Did she really want to die? Grimelda took off her helmet and answered her brother with a smile that she thought that if she could stand up, then why not? But that's not all. Squatting down, exhausted, Agredios looks at the people passing by and thinks that the capital has decided to leave them to their fate. But their bins are empty, and even if they use what the refugees brought, they won't last long. Grimelda, still smiling, says that when he covers for her, she knows that her life is in safe hands. Agredios stamps his foot irritably and asks what she would do if he slipped on cow dung and did not help her. Pretending to frown, he tells her that it would be necessary to wash the sword properly. Otherwise, they still have meat to fry on it. Grimelda smiles silently. The action is transferred to a tavern where people who have overcome a huge bull roast their meat, turning over mouth-watering pieces with tongs, and just another portion is fried and you can take it away. People are in business, and Agredios, looking at people, asks if everything has been smashed to everyone. He also asks them to inform them if anyone needs herbs for meat. Finally, he says that if everything is in its place, then you can start the meal. Pressing his hands to his chest, he invites people to offer prayer for those who are no longer with them. Those present also pray before eating. The witch Shatia leans over the plate and blows on her meat, while Grimelda slyly looks with half-open eyes at the others. Both adults and children who are sitting at the table are praying fervently, closing their eyes and pressing their hands to their chests. They all thank heaven for today's food. After finishing the prayer, people begin to eat cooked bull meat together, and there is no conversation at the table. Everyone is sitting neatly and eating their food, and only the steady clinking of cutlery which people deftly wield is heard above the tables. Agredios listens out of the corner of his ear as the cows of the refugees tap their hooves on the pavement, and suddenly an idea dawned on him. He stared at the cows walking by in amazement, as if he had remembered something important. Suddenly, Agredios broke the prolonged silence. He got up from his seat, silently pulled the extremely surprised sister Grimelda from the table, and carried her somewhere, holding her by the arms. Suddenly, Agredios, still holding Grimelda by the arms, loudly asked the people if any of them wanted more supplements. Grimelda, hearing this, made a very unhappy face, realizing that she would have to cook again. The answer to Lord Agredios' question was universal joy. People sitting at tables and chewing meat let out cheers. Their faces lit up with smiles. Ula, having filled her mouth full of meat, mutters that the meat with herbs has acquired a nutty hue, and the old woman next to her is glad that the meat is so soft that she can chew it too. One of the men asked if they had enough meat or if they still needed to chop it. Lord Agredios is obviously glad that they now have enough food to replenish their supplies, but Grimelda is kicking in his arms with a displeased face. She clearly does not want to cook and wash the dishes. Ula's mother, Navi, strokes her dozing daughter on the head and tells the others that once everyone has eaten, then they need to go to rest, because for sure the accumulated fatigue has already made itself felt. Lord Agredios spread his arms in a friendly gesture and, to the cheers of the people gathered in the tavern, loudly says that today they stood up, and tomorrow they will have a lot of new things to do. The next day, Lord Agredios began work at dawn. Now he needs to enter refugees into vacant houses and identify the profession of each in order to establish the production of goods and things. Sitting at the table over the papers, he thought about it. They will not be able to buy clothes and other things now, which means that something needs to be done, and they also need money. The financial issue is very important, so he decided to entrust it to Grimelda. Then he noticed something. The children came to his office, Percy and Perura, as well as Seisha. They put a larva on the table and smilingly clarify that the young gentleman likes to collect them, and they even brought a basket. Having decided something, Agredios goes somewhere, along the way asking Vappa if Taurus attacked the cowshed first. Wap is perplexed and at first asks my lord again, and then suddenly agrees. Because, by the way, everything was exactly like that. Agredios smiled. He praises the kids for being so smart, and he was just running out of larvae. Agredios gets dressed and asks Cedia if she will go with them. Percy and Perua are glad that she changed her name, and Percy thinks it sounds nicer now. Together they go to the forest to get the larvae. Arriving at the site of the Agredios, he gives a task to Percy and Perua, saying that they know what to do and that they do not touch live larvae and collect only dead ones. Perua ran away to complete the task, and Agredios takes one larva and shows it to Seisha. He asks her to look at it and says that if electricity is passed through it, then something will happen. The larva began to glow. Agri explains to Cedia that children collect very dense beetle cocoons. He points to Percy and says that the cocoons are hanging on the back of the leaf. Then, with such a small stature, they are easy to find. All the kids in the village were looking for them. Agri squatted down next to Percy and remembered with a laugh that they were then younger than Percy and Perua and brought barbel beetles instead of cocoons. Percy laughs, and it was. Agri continues. Looking at his palm, he says that the children then grabbed the first bug they saw and carried it in their palm like that. That's how the children brought him bugs instead of cocoons. Suddenly, Agri realized that he was crying, and Percy held out her hand to him. Baby Percy is sad too. He realized that it was hard for him to remember and hug Agredios, and in return he asks her forgiveness for this. Memory gave them both memories of those carefree kids from the village who so diligently collected the wrong bugs and carried them to Agri. Abruptly opening the doors of the hangar, Agredios loudly addresses the refugees from Anchises gathered inside. First of all, he introduced himself as the lord of these lands, and then he is going to tell them something important about the church and the royal capital. Baby Percy is crying too, but she tells Agri that the young master is just pining and that they understand everything, because they are all gone. Percy is crying, as is Agri, who continues to hug her. With tears in his eyes, he says that he should not cry because he is a lord. Then Perura runs towards them from the thicket. Perura, who jumped out of the thicket of grass, also rushed into the arms of Agri and Percy. Agri was very surprised. He called him by name. Baby Percy saw her brother and calls him. He wants to say that this is not why the young master is crying, but Perura does not listen. He screams, asking why everyone is crying and deciding that these are tears for the company. He has already burst into tears himself. Suddenly there was a sound. Suddenly, the roots that came out of the ground tightly entangled Agredios and the children, simultaneously pulling them apart. The scary-looking witch Cedia, threatening Agredios, demands that he not dare to offend Percy and Perura. Darkness has gathered around her. But the children say that she misunderstood and that the young master did not offend anyone. But Lord Agredios, hanging his head, answers them that he actually offended Seisha. The children are crying. Perura suggests that they apologize together, and Percy believes that the young gentleman should properly apologize. Agredios thinks that there was a misunderstanding then because he couldn't explain himself properly, and maybe he should apologize now, and she will understand. Out loud, he tells the children that he does not know how to apologize properly, and asks the children to teach him this. Perua advises him to tell him what he was guilty of, to say it well. Then think about the person's feelings and apologize. And Percy then suggests that you listen carefully to that person, and maybe you can make amends with something. Agri thanks them. Being still bound by his roots, he turns to the gloomy Setia with a droop and asks her for forgiveness for scaring and hurting. He promises that this will not happen again. And that's not all. Agredios bluntly informs the gathered people, among whom are his companions, that the church and the capital suspected that there was an outbreak of plague in their village, and in order to avoid a general infection, they were all simply abandoned to their fate. Raising his head, he smiles at her and thanks her for the treat, and for helping them with dinner yesterday. It was very tasty. Seisha's hand trembled. Seisha is gradually removing her roots into the ground. She says that since she came here, there has been more of her. He doesn't understand what she's talking about and what it means more. And Seisha says she wants to have even more of it. Pressing her hands through her chest, Setia says that she is here, who is afraid and who has tasted delicious food. Will they allow her to manifest herself, who previously only watched them from the forest? Agredios carefully gets up from the ground. He tells her that people call it a memory. He held out his hand and wanted to offer her something. Agredios held out his hand to her and offered to help, but before he could finish, he received a slap. A gloomy Setia hisses at him, and he wanted to offer to help her with that. Farura takes Agri's hand and shakes it contentedly. He thinks that someone is scared by handshakes, and someone on the contrary. Agredios says that the village has now become lively again, and that they may need Setia's help with food preparation. Percy shakes Setia's hand, and Agredios asks if she will let them help create more memories for her of how they eat something delicious. Setia mumbles something about memories and goodies. Seisha's eyes are filled with tears, and she hesitantly replies that she would like that. Agri thinks this is the first time they've been able to really talk. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by someone shouting loudly. Agredios turned around and saw Ulu and two children on a hill nearby, who were calling him. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Grimmel sighs with her eyes closed and sleepily thinks about why the three of them are lying so comfortably in her bed. Suddenly, Grimmel heard something outside and became alert. Lord Agredios, hiding nothing from the gathered people, also loudly and bitterly informs them that they have no more food left here, and therefore he wants to offer them something unexpected. The three of them were happily looming, trying to get his attention, and Ola was shouting loudly that Lady Grimelda was looking for Sir Agredios. Turning around, he waves back at them all and asks them to tell Grimelda that he will arrive in the village soon. The three of them are happy and leave chirping. Looking after them, Agredios thinks that this is really the case. There are more people in the village, living people, so all the sadness and sorrows will be postponed for later. Turning around and walking resolutely towards the village, the lord of the local lands, Agredios, asked for forgiveness from his deceased relatives. Water is pouring into a large barrel, and people around are engaged in harvesting. The girl says that she has not cooked such meat yet, and that it is necessary to change the proportions of the ingredients. Her grandmother tries to marinate. Grimelda warms the water with a sword and tells her brother that they have started cooking salting. The oil is boiling in the vat, and the child brought the ashes. They thank him. If they get oil from flowers, they will make a lot of soap. Agredios understands that it would be necessary to write down everyone by name, but first, something else. He shouts loudly, attracting people's attention, as his sister Grimelda needs to tell people something about money. Grimelda and Agredios whisper. This is the first time she hears about it and is unhappy that he dumped it on her without asking. Sighing, she prepares to speak. Grimelda informs that she and her brother are from the Olimilian family, and they promise that they will pay them the same as in the nonsense. But so far, there's no representative from the capital. That is why money payments remain a matter of the future. He and his brother come from a noble family, but cowardly are content with a simple life here. They understand that in order to live, they rely on their work. The face of Agredios expresses anger and rage for the fact that they were all abandoned to their fate without any help. Clenching his hand into a fist, he shouts to all people that in order for them to survive, they must open a hunt for Taros. Grimelda finished her speech and asks people to ask their questions, if there are any, and someone immediately raises their hand. The carpenter takes the floor and wants to ask about the money, whether they will definitely not be able to send it to the capital. Agredios, ruffling his hair, thinks that of course they have families there. Agredios continues to think that the problem is not so much that you can't buy new things. Grimelda replies to the petitioner that at the moment it is impossible to send money to the capital. The petitioner clutches his clothes in despair. Apparently the person is very worried that if they cannot send money, there will be trouble. The carpenter screams in desperation that if the money is not sent, then apparently their cute boy will go with his hand outstretched. Ula's mother, Navi, explains to the gentleman that Alpin, a carpenter, is raising a child alone after her husband's death. Agredios whispers to Grimelda what he will say, and clarifies whether to tell people about the curse of the forest. Grimelda believes that if they hide it, people will be even more scared. Agredios is aware that recently the village of these people was burned to the ground, and he can understand their distrust of them. Guy reports that the church in the capital did so because they are afraid of an unknown illness. His sister whispers for him to tell her about Setia, but he doesn't want to do it yet. He says out loud that he will tell you about what happened a long time ago, when the king united the lands. Agredios continues, telling the audience that then many people came to the king to work for him. Lord Agredios addresses the refugees, saying that he understands how much he wants, but he really asks them to pick watercress on the riverbank and give it to the cows that they brought with them into exile along with ordinary water. But at the same time, the swooping sickness destroyed 3/4 of the entire population of the earth. It was terrifying, and the memories of it are still alive in people's minds. Grimelda whispers for him to honestly say what the capital has done. Agredios says out loud that the destruction of Ashines was not a threat, and asks people not to judge too quickly. He thinks the most important thing right now is to come up with a plan of action, even if it's a rough one and there's something they have to do. He waves at Perura and asks her to come over, lifting the child into the air. He asks him to wave his hands and people to look at this healthy little body. And he knows that they left the nonsense full of anxiety. Perura is making faces in Agri's arms, and he wants them to understand, looking at the hot food and the smiles of others, that they were not here in vain. That's what we need to work for. And they will start by cooking food for everyone. People seemed inspired by his words, and began to make suggestions about building a barn, a workshop, and arguing about whether they could move so many bricks. Agredios, still holding Peruri, loudly informs them that they will sort everything out, but first he will write them all down on the list. People have gathered at the tavern and are happily jostling. Someone asks Wap if he will stay to work at the estate, and Nabi talks to a sad carpenter. After going to the census, Wap and Ula sit down at the table in front of Agredios, and Wap reports that their family owes him a lot. He is grateful to him for Ulu. Wap also reports that there are still those among the people who are worried, and if my lord will allow him to help, then Wap would like to talk to them. Further, Agredios explains to the gathered people that in order to lure Tauros, they need to collect cow urine and watercress, which he asks to give the cows, is just a strong diuretic. Wap bowed his head and said that as the head of the community, this is all he can offer to the person who risked his life for them. Agredios thanks him in return, as it is an honor for him, an inexperienced boy in his life. In addition, Agri reminds Wap that he also led the destruction of the wasp, and he replied that he was so tired that he forgot about it. After finishing the conversations, Agredios informs Ole that he has caught sight of someone, and that he will go talk to that person. Cautiously peeking out from behind a tree, Agredios was surprised to find a boy there. After taking a closer look at his actions, he was amazed. The boy who was sitting behind a tree was painting, and Agredios couldn't help but praise his work. The boy grunted in surprise and turned to him, holding out his hand to the boy. Agredios said that he was writing down the names of all the people. Only he remained. He finds the boy's clothes interesting and asks if he is a nobleman. When the boy saw who approached him, he beamed with joy. His name is Baron Mialonso Flaken, but Agri can call him Mian. The boy shakes Agri's hand and praises how he deftly dealt with the bull yesterday. Mian is delighted. He was finally able to see Agri up close. He is like a hero sung in legends. Agri is grateful, but confused, and Mian suddenly screamed, realizing that he had overdone it. Mian blushed. He thinks he was being rude, but he really wanted to look at Agri's hand. He thinks that now it is clear what is the matter. Aloud, he replies that everything is fine, and that it is good that no one was injured. Looking at the drawings, Mian Agri clarifies that apparently the boy was near the battle yesterday. He asks where his parents are. After finishing talking to the people in the hangar, Agredios went outside and asked Vapa to monitor the collection of watercress. Vapa agreed to help. Agredios leaves, so that at this time he can prepare shelter and food for all the people gathered. Mian replies to Agri that his father and mother have been gone for a long time, and that his uncle is looking after him now. Mian informs Agri that he originally stopped in Achilles to paint, but it turned out like this. Agri recognized Tauros in the drawing. Agri apologizes for asking the boy so easily and invites him to come to them. Maybe it won't be so luxurious compared to the capital, but still. Mian is very grateful, but asks Agri not to worry. He lives in an art school and does the laundry and cleaning himself. And speaking of money, Agri clarifies that the boy makes a living by drawing. Mian informed Agri that in the future he would really like to earn money by drawing, to which Agri honestly replied that it was still difficult. Mian obediently bowed his head. He understands that now is a difficult time, and after a moment added that he does not know how to do anything except draw. The boy beamed again, looking at Agri with enthusiastic eyes, and asks to let him know if there is anything he can help with. Agredios thought about the boy's talents, and then he heard someone shouting, calling for the young master several times. These are Perura, Percy, and Sesha. Agredios praised their catch. He is delighted with what fishermen they are. The children are happy. They said that they exchanged the rest of the fish and eggs for vinegar and oil, and that it is possible to cook. Agredios praises them once again and says it's wonderful. He offers Mian a snack with them. Agredios slouches, dejectedly wandering in an unknown direction up the street of a once noisy and crowded settlement. He automatically reflected that someone was leaning against the wall of the building a little further in his path. The whole company is cooking, and Agredios asks one of the children to hold a fork in a certain way while he whips up the mixture. Percy and Perura, making determined faces, help Agri cook the fish. They dip it in a bucket. Agredios praises them again, and he also got a great mix. But seeing her, Perura's hair stood on end. Perura jumped up to Agri, who is sitting next to a bucket of fish. And Agri, with a grin, states that Perura, as always. By stretching her fingers to his hair, Agri produces a small electric spark. Small electrical discharges run through Perura's body, but he seems to like it. But Sesha, seeing this, was horrified. Sesha immediately took a staff from the roots and grabbed the neck of Agredios with it, threatening to harm him. But he repeats that she misunderstood everything again, and that Perura likes it when electricity runs through him. Mian, looking at what was happening, also did not understand anything, and asked Agredios what they were doing with Perura now. Perura looks at the bucket of fish with loving eyes. Agri explains to Mian and Setia that there are parasites in raw fish, and he gets rid of them with electricity. Perura, out of an excess of feelings, clings to the arm of Agredios and shouts that he simply adores mackerel. Agri agrees. Apparently for Perura, he and mackerel are the same thing. Agri hugged Perura. He agrees with this, because Perura is the only one who loves his boring magic. Stopping by this man, Agredios realizes that this is his sister Grimelda. He calls her name thoughtfully and falls silent for a while. Then he asks Grimelda to feed the refugees who came to them with at least something. Mian looks shocked. He presses his hands to his mouth in fright and asks Agredios if he really plans to eat fish raw. Agri, smiling cunningly, pulled the fish out of the bucket and informs Mian that the local people are unaccustomed to sea fish. He asks if Mian will have fish, but he'd rather starve. Mian, thoughtfully looking at Agredios, drowns about the sea fish, and it is not about the land and sea of Oblivion that we are talking about. Agredios didn't seem surprised that Mian knew about it. That's how this sea is, which people have been winning back from nature for generations. Finally, the fish is ready. Agri beautifully cut it into small pieces and poured it with the mixture he was cooking. Having laid out the fish on a plate, he informs that everything is ready and you can eat. Smiling slyly, Agri hands Mian a piece of fish and asks him to taste it. Mian fatally eats the offered fish, and so the faces of Mian and Setia lit up, because the fish turned out to be delicious. Agri is glad that Setia seems to like it too. Perura is delighted, because the fish melts in her mouth. Then suddenly, Percy takes out a cup and shows it to Sesha. There are beans there. Sesha immediately makes huge eyes. Percy abruptly removes the cup of beans, and the full force of Setia's breath falls on the Agredios sitting next to him. He automatically thinks that it is something hard and stinks of mold. Percy, with shining eyes, turns to Setia. She also wants to learn how to cook stinky beans, and asks her to tell her how. But Grimelda did not seem to hear him. She was sad, and, without looking at his face, thoughtfully said that their intended prey was a bull, the size of a house. She asks her brother if he really thinks they have any chance of winning. Sesha thought about Percy's request. She suggests that in order to cook them, you can blow hay sticks into them. Suddenly, Percy points to the leaves above his head and tells Sesha that she can't reach them. But Sesha can. She points to herself and says she can, but Sesha can. Percy says he can't do magic, so he asks Setia to tell him how to cook beans without magic. Setia understood her. Agri, who saw this, is shocked. Agri is shocked at Percy's ability to explain, but Sesha herself doesn't know what she can do and what she can't do. And a strange curse appeared in her mouth from the fish. And what happens if it is transferred to beans? Then Seisha blew on the cup of beans again, turning them into some kind of mass. Parura's eyes lit up, and he immediately wants to try it. But Agri does not allow it. Without thinking twice, Percy dips his finger into the cup and pulls it into his mouth, causing a cry of surprise. Percy thought for a moment, not responding to the call, and then boldly smeared the pieces of fish with the resulting mixture, and offers Agri and Mian to try. Agri looks at the fish in horror and tells the frightened man that they should eat what they were given on the count of 3. And Agri eats. Paruri did not escape this either. Percy put a fish in his mouth, and suddenly all 3 of them froze in admiration, because this unfamiliar taste turned out to be so sweet. With it, the already sweet fish became even sweeter. Being completely delighted with the food, Paruri happily announces that it is delicious, and rushes to Setia, shouting that he loves her. Agredios is exhausted. He answers his sister without emotion and without any hope in his voice that, to tell the truth, he generally believes that they have no chance in this case. Seeing this, Agri shouts in frustration that how could he have been exchanged for Setia? Mian laughs. Finally, Agri reports that this is all and gives Mian the task to capture these children so that he can watch them later. Agredios asks Mian to draw a picture book, and this request surprised both Mian and Setia, who was standing next to him. The pickle boss told Agri that knowledge is passed from mouth to mouth, and that if you haven't heard, then right is gone. And if what Seisha did is repeated with bull meat, it will turn out delicious. Agri informs them that they really need food now, but after that they will need the foundation of all the basics, and this is knowledge. He believes that Percy and Parura have their strengths, and the people of Akinis brought wisdom with them. And if they learn the principle of Setia's spells, then they can do it themselves. Agredios looks at the boy and believes that it is he who will be able to capture all this on paper. Mian smiles. He agrees. Mian smiles and tells the others his name and that he will be happy to work with him. The children reply that they will also be happy and that the beans are smelly, but very tasty. Agredios, looking at the children with a smile, thinks about what good guys they are, and that they will get used to it pretty soon. Agri asks the children at Setia to go back without him. He needs to go to the estate. He asks me to tell Gree that he will be back in the morning. Mian understood. Walking through the estate, Agri thinks that they are tied hand and foot because of the bandits. And if they're here, it means they're covering their tracks. Agredios is gloomy. He's overcome by heavy thoughts. He's absolutely sure that this is the church that burned the nonsense and that he has a conversation with them. Grimelda is trembling, but she is a knight and therefore restrains her emotions, only clutching her faithful sheathed sword tighter to her chest. After a short pause, she uncertainly asks her brother what will happen if there is no chance. The church servants gathered around the campfire are talking. One passes the drink to Mr. Krunig. He thanks and informs them that they will attack at night. Krunig reports that Taros is exhausted and their squad has a chance. If they defeat him, then the people left to their fate will begin to believe in them. The assistant understood him. He will start preparing now. Krunig is sure that they need to complete the mission at all costs. Another warrior came with a report. The speaker reported that the settlers seemed to be alive. Krunig does not believe it, because the tracks of the bull led directly to the village. But that's not all. Intelligence saw smoke. It looks like those people are cooking there. Has Grimelda dancing flame returned to the settlement and the bull is destroyed? Krunig does not believe how such a huge beast can be killed. Krunig warily says that they could have taken the beast away, but if so, then they must finish it off. And then a certain figure turns to the servants of the Church of the Blessing Hand. A gloomy figure in the clearing announces that he is the son of Margrave Olamilian, who inherited his lands. And this figure is Agredios from the house of Olamilian. He asks his servants to decide where the negotiations will take place. Krunig calls the warriors in shock. Krunig commands his servant warriors to take their swords at the ready and finish off the stranger who appeared. Agredios asks the attendants if they want to communicate with him with weapons and activates a smoke bomb. The attendants are surprised by the smokescreen. Out of habit, taking her trusty sword, Grimmel realizes that some noise is coming from outside the house. She went to the window in their room and carefully pulls back the curtain to see what is happening outside. The children and Setia are still sleeping. Continuing to hold the sword to herself, the usually determined and strong-willed Grimelda, with her head down, asks her brother what will happen to her if she loses him as well as the rest of her family in this Taurus hunt. Krunig commands the spearmen to form a line and attack the enemy. Someone asked if this was the one. But in response, Krunig said that if he escaped, they would report that the group that burned the forest was here. The attendants go on the attack, shouting that if that smoke over the village was a signal for help, then it's too late. Suddenly, a trap has been triggered. The Agredios attacking them knocked down one minister first. He grunted, then appeared out of nowhere and attacked another. Agredios continues to attack the attendants under the cover of the veil. He knocks down all the soldiers in the squad in turn. Krunig, standing a little behind in shock, and does not understand what is happening. He does not believe that the enemy has not escaped. Finally, Agredios comes out of the smoke screen and clears his throat. Krunig is triumphant that the enemy has appeared. Krunig commands his men to raise their shields, and the swordsmen are ordered to surround Agredios. Grinning maliciously, Agredios activates some kind of secret weapon on his body, and a huge shadow hand appeared above him and hurled a hammer. The warriors from Krunig's squad continue to fall, defeated by invisible blows, and he himself is unable to understand what is happening behind. And so Agredios appeared in front of him, with a hammer in one hand and the other clad in armor. He offers them the choice to lay down their arms or continue. Wanting to calm his sister down, Agredios silently reached out and stroked her head, and then just hugged her to him, giving her the opportunity to let her emotions loose. Grimelda, burying her face in his chest, sobs faintly. Stung by such a suggestion from a youngster, Krunig yells furiously, asking if he is laughing, and activates his weapon. Krunig swings a powerful blow at the figure in front of him, but Agredios did not even move to evade. Krunig's blow reached the target, but he is surprised to hear some strange sound, and his warriors tensed up. At that moment, Agredios jumped out of the smoke with a hammer in his hands and a gloomy expression on his face. He's going to attack the soldiers, and several more soldiers came out of the fight, having received crushing blows from Agredios with his hammer. Moving quickly and silently through the clearing, he put the entire Krunig squad out of action with his claws on his armor and a hammer. Krunig only manages to display how his warriors are falling backwards all over the site, like pieces on a board. He's mentally questioning himself about something. Krunig is in shock. He does not understand what is happening and what kind of creature they are fighting here right now. Krunig activates his weapon and realizes that they can no longer complete the mission, but he won't just give up. Krunig, raising his strength, rushed to the attack. He is absolutely sure that at least he will finish this kid here now. Continuing to hug the upset Grimelda, Agredios calmly says that she recently mourned her father and mother. He apologizes to her for his decisions, but he has a purpose. Agredios on the one hand, and Krunig on the other hand, rush towards each other with the desire to destroy the opponent. The Agredios running forward displayed that something unusual and dangerous was flying straight towards him in the air. But this did not detain Agredios. Raising his hand, he caught the weapon thrown by Krunig and repelled his blow. Krunig watched the actions of Agredios, and he is completely shocked by how he managed to do it. Krunig's eyes express fear and bewilderment. He looks at the approaching warrior as if spellbound, and falls after receiving a blow, dropping his weapon. Standing in front of Krunig and twirling his weapon on his hand, Agredios gloomily welcomes him to the settlement and asks permission to greet a respected member of the church. Agredios allows them to heal their wounds and demands that they leave. Krunig gloomily reports that his squad does not have such craftsmen. Suddenly, Agredios was embarrassed. It turned out to be awkward. Krunig looks in shock at Agredios, who says he will bring horses for the wounded. They need to leave, because the noise could attract monsters. By dawn, the entire procession had reached the refugee settlement, which was crowded at the gate. Krunig looks at them in shock. Agredios, who has become a friendly young lord again, happily waves to the gathered people. Krunig continues to stare at the people, all of them unharmed. And Agredios reported that the stakes from Taros were completely finished yesterday. Slightly pulling away from her brother, Grimelda still listens to his speech without looking up. Agredios continues to stroke her head, saying that he understands how she feels now. Krunig mumbles something about Taros, but he understands everything. He asks Agredios for permission to talk to people. The gathered people are silently waiting for what Krunig will say, and he introduced himself in form and said that their village was destroyed by their squad and no one else. Wap, worried, asks him why the people of the church destroyed their houses and then abandoned them. Krunig replied gloomily that this was so that the disease would not go further. because there was no evidence that Vapa people were not infected. Grimelda whispers to her brother that Krunig is partially lying. Agur replies that he will leave it all as it is for now, because he wants to establish an exchange with the capital through the church. Kronig bows to the people and, as the one who led the operation, asks them for forgiveness. His whole life will not be enough to atone for his guilt. He promises the villagers that he will pray to God that they all do not know the hardships in life. Krunig emphatically announces that their contract with the church is over. He taps his chest armor. Looking at Agredios and Grimelda, he informs them that as they were able to make sure, their mission ended in complete failure. Kronig smiled a little. He doesn't feel so bad, and you can say that they tried, but without much zeal. His warriors agree and are glad that they were not the only ones who thought so. They could only pray for the departed. Cruelty was demanded of them. Releasing his sister, Agredios continues on his way, resolutely ending the conversation with her and saying that since only they can fight, they will certainly fight for their lives. Former soldiers of the church believe that refugees are those who have been tested and they will pray for them for the salvation of souls. Krunig wants to add something, but falls silent. All the warriors are holding flasks in their hands. Krunig, looking at her thoughtfully, asks people for forgiveness once again. His warriors ask Krunig not to worry, and suddenly someone coughed, which attracted the attention of Agredios and Grimelda. The soldiers who have been drinking from the flasks cough, and Agredios shouts loudly, as if asking Krunig not to drink from the flask. Krunig is surprised by the taste from the bottle. It looks like honey. His people around are falling and coughing in convulsions. Agredios rushes towards them and screams horribly, calling them fools. But Krunig's people are already all on earth, except himself. Agredios grabs Krunig by the shoulders and shouts at him, asking if he gave his men poison. Krunig is shocked and swears. Vep starts shouting commands loudly. He shouts at Ole to grab barrels of water and oil and drag them here on a butch, and tells Perua to grab a leather bag. Agredios is shocked. Because of the guy with the skills of a magician among the warriors, he misunderstood everything. These people are just pawns that it was decided in advance to get rid of. Then Setia rushed past him. Taking a deep breath, Seisha blew very hard on the Krunig people lying on the ground, raising a cloud of steam. Suddenly, everyone who drank the poison changed their face and began coughing and choking, as if they were sick, and a certain clot came out of everyone's mouth. Grimelda, the sister of Lord Agredios in the night, hesitating a little after hearing this, resolutely follows him to help. The warriors who were sickened by an unknown substance suddenly realized that they were no longer dying, but they all did not understand what had happened. Seisha, after she performed the spell, lost consciousness and began to fall. Agredios immediately jumped up to her and caught her. Setia huffs, and Agredios asks if she's okay and thanks her for healing them from the poison. And then suddenly Setia painfully grabbed Agredios by the cheek. He screamed and said that he did not touch her, and she calls him a liar. Seisha cries and reminds him that he promised not to scare or hurt. Then why did he offend these people? She sobs that she hates him. But he was actually worried about her. He realized that it was no longer possible to smooth out the truth and make her cry. Getting up and picking up Percy in his arms, he told Setia that the soldiers had been injured in a fight with him. They lost and drank the poison themselves. He explained that the warriors wanted to force the people in the village to obey them, that they themselves had chosen a bad path. Fighting is one of the forms of communication. Just like he had done to her earlier, he says that by causing pain, you can bend a person to your will, and a bad action is necessary to prevail over a rival, and it also leads to the thought of death. She asked if he would do that to them again. He confirmed. They will pay for what they have done. Seisha screams, asking why he is so cruel. Agredios replies that he will make them apologize to Eula and everyone else. He shouts at Krunig's men, ordering those who can stand up. He declared them his prisoners, and now they obey his orders, not the church's. While Agredios was talking to his sister Grimelda, someone was standing around the corner of one of the buildings, and this someone probably heard every word they said. He turned to the people of nonsense. He does not ask them to forget their grievances, but asks them to look at these people and their attempt to commit suicide. The higher ranks are responsible for all this, which pushes those in their power to do this. He gestures for Percy to plug his ears. He wants to say something directly. He shouts that those who gave such an order are real scoundrels. He addresses the warriors in pointed helmets standing opposite. These are spearmen. He automatically thinks that he seems to have broken their arms and legs. He is shocked at how famously Satya cured the warriors of everything at once. You need to use it. He gives orders to the prisoners, saying that they will work at the sawmill and take bees to the field, as well as guard the herb pickers. He suggests they work together. Sisha listens attentively, and Wap added that until they get to know each other, they will not be able to make amends. None of Achini's men died, but still it's not enough. Other people also remembered their losses. Ula did not have time to pick up her grandfather's book. Someone did not take their bowls in a wedding dress, despite the fact that it is already small. Another man came forward. He says that all their fields, along with the entire culture, were also lost in the fire. He paused and then wants to say something else. Lifting their capes from their faces, the people of nonsense do not believe that they hate the soldiers of the church. Wap, seeing their eyes, laments that Marf and Tor also suffered. Wap asks the former soldiers of the church to listen to his request. He asks them to share their strength so that they can all survive. Krunig warily sat down on the ground and motioned for people to come to him. People are crowding around Krunig and chattering, asking for an answer. He does not understand what they want because he is also a prisoner and having a chance to live on. Will they decide to destroy the villagers or obey the Lord? The choice is up to them. It turns out that an unwitting witness to the difficult conversation between Agredios and Grimelda was their companion. A teenage girl, Ula, she was clearly amazed by what she heard and froze, as if trying to realize everything. And so the former Aeons obediently scattered to help the Hinesians. And Agri sat down next to Sisha and asked her not to quarrel, and he wants to ask her to help him cook dinner again today. Secha is in tears again. She reaches out and hugs Percy. Agri says that humans eat, destroy, coexist, and change just like curses. But people have words with which they appeal to each other. Seisha hopes that he won't hurt those people anymore. He promises not to harm them, because these are the lives she saved. Percy turns to the young gentleman. Percy asks why he's been carrying her around all this time. To this, Agri was embarrassed and replied that he was just thinking what she would say in his place. Then he was distracted by a sound behind him. One of his subordinates ran into Krunig with sobs and hugs. She is glad that they are alive and talking. Krunig gave the crybaby a powerful click, and she rolls on the ground, and Agredios clarifies what the remaining 3 people are doing. The girl who received the click replies that they are doctors. She asks what happened to them and tries to touch what came out of the warriors' bodies, but Seti forbids it. These are mushrooms, and they have absorbed all the curse. It looks like the one that the forest destroyed the village with. Agredios asks what they drank. They reply that it was arsenic. He asks if they know if the body can stop rotting because of arsenic. Doctors reported that there is such a thing as swinification of the body, but this is only a method of processing the remains. He clarified whether this happened during the epidemics of the past. Doctors do not think. Agri walked away and stroked Perura's head. The medical girl is crying. They still have arsenic. They had to destroy everyone, even the children. Krunig added that the plan was to gain the trust of the residents by destroying Taros and then destroy themselves. The next day, the people gathered in the settlement began preparations to lure Taros. Taking shovels, they collect cow manure. Agredios asked Krunig why he was the only one who didn't get hurt. Is it really a blessing? Krunig is silent, but the medical girl is about to say something. Krunig tries to stop her. The medical girl reports that Krunig is the illegitimate son of the king. Agredios is confused as to whether the inquisitor of the church is the illegitimate son of the king. Agri shouts in shock that this is terrible and that it is not necessary to involve the political intrigues of the aristocrats in the church here, so there are a lot of problems. Grimelda calmly asks him to stop yelling, and Krunig grimly reminded him that it was the Lord who brought them here. Agri yells that they don't have enough workers and he brought soldiers because they really need guards, and he wanted to put them to work. Krunig and the medic are shocked. Is this really the real reason? Grimelda asks him to calm down, because in the end, only Krunig will be able to return to the capital. Agri remembered the goods and money, but the sister is not sure that the church should know that people survived, and wants to know about the priority goals of their plan. She clarifies with Krunig that first of all they needed to destroy people or fields, to which he replied that fields. She thinks it's suspicious. Grimelda argues that the kingdom has lost a village producing 30% salt, If you also burn a granary with 20% grain, it will weaken the aristocracy. And although there are reasons not to leave abandoned fields to mice and birds from the forest, mice were especially feared during the years of disasters. Agri believes that this is well noticed and it is necessary to combine these two facts. But he is not strong in politics because all this is boring and therefore he counts on his sister Grimelda in this matter. As soon as the opportunity presents itself, he will go with Krungi to the capital, no matter what happens there. The issue of money transfers must be resolved. Agredios orders people to collect the slurry from cow urine and manure and pour it on hot stones so that the wind will carry this stench around the neighborhood and then toros will definitely come out of the forest. Agredios asks the medics to stand up and informs them that their main task will be to fight the forbidden forest. Doctors are clarifying whether he is now talking about the epidemic that destroyed his settlement. He replied that it would not be enough to simply isolate the village he trusted them with. This is something that the survivors should accept in gratitude for their rescue. And that if everything happens again, then the capital will not be an exception either. He asks them to find a way to protect themselves from the epidemic. Agri calls Perura to her. The medical girl does not know how to do this, because they have no leads. He replies that he is not rushing them, because there are other things to do. He asks them to multiply the food in order to preserve the health of the residents of the capital and the inhabitants of the settlement. He tells them to go after the spearmen and collect tea leaves. The medical girl is crying. Her name is Nafka, and she is grateful that he did not destroy them and did not let them do the same. He paused, and then offers to prove it by deeds. He tells Kruni to grab the magic silver, because he did not think that he would eat for free. They all go to the sea. Standing by the boat, Agri informs that Perua is the only one with experience, and everyone should obey him. Perua tells them to put on their life belts first. Mien came up. He got acquainted with Krunig and he asked what they would do. Agri replied that Mien needed practice, and Krunig should use magic to guide the boat. Perua brought maggots. It looks like they're ready to push the boat. Mien lets out an enthusiastic exclamation. They go fishing in the sea, given to them by their ancestors after so much effort. Mien is shocked. It looks like he got a fish on the hook. He calls Mr. Agri and he asks if the fish is big, and advises to lower his lower back a little. Agri thinks that fishing rods are good, but I would also like to use a seine. Looking out the window of her room, behind which she heard a vague noise. Grimel saw something and opened her eyes wide in surprise. It seems that something happened there and it struck her. Even the children found something to do. Twins Percy and Perura are sitting in the watchtower, and using a telescope they look out for a flock of birds above the trees, which Taros will scare when he comes out of the forest. With a sen, the catch would be bigger. Krunig notices something with a fishing rod and says that there is something here, it looks like tentacles. And then the boat rocked. Their boat was attacked by a huge squid from the depths of the sea. Krunig begins to swing the weapon, cutting off its tentacles. Agri makes a face so that Krunig does not touch the squid, and that it is approaching. Suddenly, the squid grabbed Krunig's arm, but Perua deftly poured oil from a bucket over the surprised Krunig's hand. The tentacle immediately slipped off, releasing Krunig, causing him a shock. Perua quickly runs along the boat and smears the sides with oil, shouting with oil. The squid will not be able to cling to the boat, but they need to leave. Agri loudly tells Krunig to use magic to direct the wind into the sails, and at the same time hold Mien. He obeys. A powerful gust of wind blows the boat forward famously. The Agri on the deck groans at how fast they are rushing. They have left the squid. Perua joyfully shouts that they have succeeded with magic. Agri is also happy and offers to throw a sen next time. He pulls the boat ashore, and Krunig, sighing wearily, is surprised that there are such monsters in the sea. Agra is tired. It is necessary to remember on the nose that it is dangerous to go to sea, and that it is not easy. Then Mien calls him loudly. Agra turned around and was surprised. Mien and Perura are holding a huge fish. Agra praises him. This fish will make a sumptuous soup, and they will distribute the rest. But first you need to clean the boat of oil. Tell Agri that he and Krunig will do it while they collect the catch, and that the children take this fish. Agri and Krunig wash the boat of oil. Agri reports that they would not have survived the winter, but the magic gave hope. Krunig replied that he studied it in order to destroy enemies in a church that forbids everything except medicine. and behind closed doors. Looking at how people are preparing bait for the huge taros, Ula asks Lord Agredios what will happen next after they lure taros here. Agredios tells her that according to the plan, he or Grimelda will jump on top and stab him in the neck. But Krunig is not going to complain about fate at all. Then Agri suggests that he figure out how to catch that squid. He's going to take the fish and leaves the rest to Krunig. Looking at the sunset, he thinks that magic is really hope. He remembers that the heretics whom he was ordered to destroy as enemies were parents who went against the decrees of the church. Krunig remembers that those people were the ones who did not abandon the children of hybrids, such as his companion Nafka. Someone's voice is heard complaining that they have scattered all the tools here. This is Percy. She asks Krunig to help her dry the nets with baskets. He agrees. She says that she also needs to thank God for the big catch, but he does not understand which god she is talking about. Then Percy explains to him that this is a huge whale cub god and lives at the bottom of the sea. He automatically thinks that a false god is worshipped in the settlement. She continues that you need to fold your arms over your chest to pray. He understood everything. Krunig, standing next to Percy, recalls that even such an innocent faith is rejected as heresy. But you need to be strong for those who can rely only on faith. He prays too, thinking that tolerance is really a weakness. Standing on the seashore, Krunig and Percy pray to God, thanking him for giving them this wonderful food today. Dinner is in full swing in the tavern. People are eating fish. It has a very unusual taste, sweet and salty at the same time. They would like to produce such things themselves, but their stocks are almost empty. And that's why we need to act. Agri turns to Mafu and To. They are the main cultivators. They suggest finding the right land by the sea, since it's spring and it's time for soybeans. Agri believes that it is necessary to sort out the crops before the meat runs out. Agri tells Krunig to take a look, because they fried the tentacles of the squid he caught, and serves him food. Krunig is shocked that the aristocrats do not disdain monster meat, and do not dare to eat. Ula, hearing this, looks at Agredios in fright. She is trembling. He smiles slightly. He understands that this sounds very crazy, and it would be great to dig a wolf pit for bull hunting. But they have nowhere to take so many free hands for such a thing. Suddenly, one of the doctors began to cry. Krunig clarified what was the matter. He apologizes, because he used to eat food that was bland for many years. Nafka agrees with him that the food here is very tasty. Then Krunig tells the medic to enjoy the food, because tomorrow Agri will exploit them again. And I agree cheerfully, it will be so. Then someone called out to him. This is Maf and Tuvi. They thank him that he did not look down on them, recognizing their vulnerable position as hybrids. Agri replied that he was glad that they were doing well. They say that everyone in the nonsense was kind to them, but if such a thing had happened in a place under the control of the capital, they would have already despaired. They ask Mr. Agri if they can get a blessing for a child in his settlement. He tells them that he remembers how a crowd of children used to greet him on the hunting field, asking what he had caught. He would really like to hear that babble of children's voices again. Maf and Tuvi are grateful. Agri and Krunig suddenly change their faces. People ask what's wrong with the gentleman. He holds his hand over his mouth and apologizes for spoiling such a moment. But that's why the squid meat is so smelly. Perura reports that large squid are tasteless and smelly. Agri screams that Perura could have said this before. There is general fun and communication in the tavern. Grimelda, standing a little behind, laughs, looking at this fuss. Suddenly, Seisha jumped up from her seat. Grimelda asks what happened. Seisha hesitated, picked up her staff, and suddenly screamed in horror that they needed to close the window. Instantly, a sharp and very strong wind burst into the tavern, knocking people and furniture off their feet. The wind began to extinguish the fire and spoil the food that people had so diligently prepared for dinner. Agri is shocked. Agredios informs Ole that they need to come up with something so the Taros will come right at him. He asks her to discuss it with the others and that if they come up with something, then let him know about it, as he is ready to listen to any ideas. 2 days have passed. Along with the wind, a stench entered the tavern. People shout that it smells unpleasant. There's a taste of rust in their mouth, and their eyes sting. Agri rushed to Sedia, who was standing at the entrance with a staff, really again. Setia on the street with a staff looks into the distance and repeats that this is impossible because they will all die. She's very scared. Setia raised her staff. She activated her magical powers and screams in despair that she will not let them die. People have closed the windows in the tavern, protected their faces with rag masks, but they still cough. Agri and a few people at the entrance. He calls Setia, but she mumbles something. Setia fell to her knees, muttering that the curse would not touch a human. Agri ran up and sat down next to him. Everything inside him shrank from how sharply the wind blew, but he does not understand what happened. Setia informs him that the water is tainted. She repeats over and over that the water is spoiled. Agri asks Grimelda to send people home, and he will go with Setia and see what's with the water. Sitting by the water, Agri asks Setia if this means that the water from their river can no longer be drunk. Setia replied that so far people are stronger, but it won't last long. Setia assumes that the forest got rid of the stagnant sediment. It is weaker than the curse past, but the poison in the water will accumulate. And then one death will be followed by many. Agri understands that they need water not only for drinking, and they need to figure out how to clean the river. Suddenly she called him Agredios. He is amazed that she called him by his first name. Setia says he lost everyone, and it was painful. And she knows that he followed death into the forest then, depressed like people with long ears. My hands and feet turned cold and black, thinking that everyone was dying. After 2 days of preparation, Agredios stands on the roof of the house and, looking at the watchtower, hears 2 strokes of the bell. This is a signal that a cloud of birds has risen into the sky. He worries about the people in the settlement. He agrees that while he was collecting the bodies, it was so. Absolutely unbearable. But out of desperation, he was pulled out by the children, who were then saved by Setia. He informs her that Setia saved not only his life, but also his heart, so he asks for permission to use the chance she gave so that everyone would be alive and well. Setia's face lit up with a smile. She agrees. But Agri does not understand what they should do with the poisoned water now. Setia says we need stinky beans. Agri asked if these were the beans that little Percy liked. Setia, looking at him, confirmed it. Yes, those are the beans they need. They need a lot of stinky beans. The next day, Agri gives instructions, saying that the residents of the Yakinis can contact his sister, and that everyone who has relatives in need of money in the capital will receive financial support. Agri asks people to be patient, because the measures taken by the church in the fight against the epidemic cause fear in the capital. They may think that they will seek salvation from the capital's relatives, and those may expel them from the capital. Their ultimate goal is to convince the capital that everything is fine. Until then, their health will be a secret. He asks his sister to come over. He informs her that the 2 of them will go to the capital together. Agri knows that they really need soybeans to sow the fields. Then Nafta turns to him. She asks him to take her with him. She also asked about the symptoms, and that if disinfection by boiling water would help, then most likely it was dysentery. And although the village and the capital have different water sources, she wants to test the water. In addition, Nafka wants to visit the children at the shelter. Agri replied that he would check the water, but the shelter would not allow it. Kronig offers to take her as his deputy, because it is unknown what the church will do to him. Agredios thinks that the refugees from Achilles are already exhausted and barely stand on their feet, and he also strains them to work in preparation for the bull hunt, while not even feeding them humanly. If Kronig doesn't get support, then they're unlikely to be able to get supplies out of the city. Agri thought about it. Grimelda reports that there is not enough cash, and ordinary people cannot use their family's promissory notes. Kir Mian offers his help, because he's an aristocrat, and besides, he did not inform the academy that he was in nonsense. Agri is not sure that this is possible, because they will get him into trouble. But Mian will be happy to help. Agri says to start preparing. Swordsmen will help with the search for farmland. They can take horses. Spearmen and shield bearers will guard the food pickers. Some girl tells the soldiers that they are picking Auralia today, but she is bitter and does not like it. Kronig, looking at them, sees that they are not hiding under hoods. Agri said that they did not tell them about the plans of the church to destroy the idiots. Kronig asked gloomily what Agri was up to and if he was expecting gratitude. Agri replied that it was possible. He asks to warn the warriors so that they repent one at a time. If they start, then together. Kronig snorts in response to his words. Agri asks them to pack their things with Navka. Grimelda asks her brother to help her with the poles, but he doesn't want to. A few days later, carts are driving through the forest. Agri asks Ulu to stop at the border of Aeschines. Here they will split up. Sitting in a cart with Krunig, Navka, and Mian, Agri asks her to collect water from the nearest river and take it to Setia. He tells two warriors to take care of Ula and ordered Mian and Navka to wait in the wagon. He and Kronig went on and sat down to watch. Looking at the cordon of soldiers with weapons, Agri realizes that everything is much stricter than he expected. Kronig asks if he has any ideas. Agri suggests that he go. Showing the Inquisitor's sword, they will go the other way and meet at the bank. Kronig agrees. Distracted from his thoughts, Agredios looks anxiously towards the watchtower again. The children of Percy and Perur were supposed to ring the bell 5 times when the bull appears from the forest. But for some reason the bell on the tower does not stop. Walking to the cordon, Krunig thinks about what other way Agri was talking about because they have only rocks all around, and it can't be that they could get through. Suddenly Krunig hears some kind of whistle. He strained his eyes. Agri is yelling at Krunig to hide behind him. An incredible number of arrows are flying at Krunig from the cordon, whistling and clearly wanting to hit him. He froze in amazement, looking at their flight. Agredios realized with horror that someone seemed to be coming here. Mechanically, he raised his hand in a defensive gesture when he heard a scream from below. Someone shouts out and calls him several times, calling him the young lord. Looking down, Agredios sees baby Percy. She is scared and screams, pointing somewhere with her finger and as if asking him to look, because there is Ula and something is happening there. Continuing to stand on the roof, Agredios straightened up. He almost immediately felt the roof tremble under his feet. He is surprised if the ground is shaking so much from someone's footsteps. Suddenly, he tensed in horror and stared at something, seeing what was happening outside the window. Grimelda quickly dressed, took her equipment and weapons, and hurriedly left the room, where the witch Sacia, as well as the twins Perura and Percy, continued to sleep peacefully on her bed. And then Agredios sees Ula running down the street as fast as she can, shouting loudly to all people to run away. And right behind her rushes a huge horned monster. This is the bull Taros. From the roof, Agredios shouts at people to stay away from the walls. The trained body of Agredios instantly darted across the roofs of houses to meet the attack of the bull. On the run, he realizes with horror that Ula probably used herself as bait. Continuing to run quickly across the roofs of houses, Agredios thinks that Ula has made herself a bait for the bull because of what he told her 2 days ago when he asked her to find some way. Agredios has reached Taros. He's preparing to attack and has already taken out the rope. He is shocked to realize that Ula has become a bait for the bull by her own will, since he was the one who asked her to discuss with people a way to lure the bull to meet Agredios Tara. To Zephananes, Lord Agredios makes an incredible jump from the roofs of houses, aiming to get straight to the neck of the huge bull Taros, who, without sorting out the way, rushes down the street after his prey. With a practiced movement, Agredios deftly threw a rope with a loop towards a running hefty bull. He tried to hook it by the horns, and he succeeded. The rope caught on a huge horn. Manipulating the rope, Agredios throws it over the horns of a hefty beast, trying to hook it tighter. But he immediately realizes that the rope has stretched to the limit and is trembling, threatening to break. He must act now. Someone commands that when Agredios hits, he aims directly at the bull's cervical vertebra and, as if obeying, Agredios landed on the bull and with a spear strikes a strong blow at the neck of the monster. Having been struck by a spear, the monstrous bull screams deafeningly, throwing up his head, and the Agredios on his neck screams that the spear point did not penetrate the thick hide of the bull, and suddenly, the tip of the spear fell away from the shaft. But Agredios did not lose his head, and screams that then he will use the force of his hammer blows. He is already swinging furiously, preparing to strike at the point stuck in the neck of the Taurus monster. Someone's caring hands deliver a cup of hot water into the waiting hands of another person, and a call is heard to drink this water in small sips. Suddenly, Ula, running ahead of the monster, stumbles on the pavement and falls backwards, finding herself right in the path of the bull Taros, which means he will trample her. Agredios, who saw what happened in horror, he realizes that a huge angry bull, sweeping away everything in its path, is rushing straight at the Ulu that fell in front of him. Agredios immediately made a decision and threw away his hammer. Still holding the rope, which is fixed to the bull's horn. Agredios jumped over its muzzle in an attempt to prevent it, because what happens if he fails to protect at least one person? He blocked the bull's path with himself and picked up Ulu. Blocking the bull's path, Agredios thinks that if he cannot save Ulu, then what kind of lord is he? Taros immediately delivered a powerful blow with his forehead to the back of Agredios, causing his body to twist out and his face to contort in pain. The blow received by Agredios in the back from the Taros monster was so strong that he, along with the beehive he was holding in his hands, flew away. At the same time, they flew into one of the houses, breaking through the window with their bodies and raising a cloud of fragments and dust. Lying among the fragments, Agredios raised his head with a furious grin. He thinks that he will never let go of the bull. He gets up and thanks Ulu, who is lying next to him, saying that she did a great job and asks her to leave here. Barely getting up from the floor, Agredios spits blood and thinks that all the available elastic threads have gone to the rope, and he dropped the hammer. At the same time, he intends to ride the bull again and finish the job. Suddenly, a strong jerk interrupted his thoughts and threw him out of the house. Agredios is shocked, but at the same time, he continues to hold the rope tightly, the other end of which is hooked on the horns of the bull, and the bull quickly drags him along. Incredibly huge and very evil monster Taros continues its run down the street, raising clouds of dust and debris. Agredios, on the other hand, tries to hold the rope in his hands. He curses, not knowing how to jump on a rushing bull. Agredios continues to run after the bull, holding on to the rope. He thinks about how he can jump on Taros's back and that the bull is dragging him so hard, despite the obstacles, that he won't be able to stand it for a long time. In a large hangar, a crowd of people, Ula, Agredios, and others from the group help the gathered people by bringing them water and food. The people in the hangar look like refugees. They are exhausted, and there are a lot of them. Watching as the Taurus monster breaks through the pavement with its terrible hooves and chops off pieces of it, Agredios thinks with horror that he cannot allow any of the people to get under his hooves. Suddenly, a figure with a flaming sword and armor appeared in the path of the monstrous bull of Taros. This man has clearly prepared to repel the attack, and is waiting for the bull in full readiness. Agredios knows who it is. This man is his sister Grimelda. He is in shock and does not understand why she came out. Did she really want to get on the horns of the bull Taros? But then he thinks that if nothing is done, something terrible will happen. Agredios, continuing to reflect, immediately realized with horror that if they did nothing and retreated, then their ancestral estate, their house, would be mercilessly trampled by some shoddy cow. And suddenly it dawned on him what could be done to distract the bull. Agredios yells furiously and calls his sister by name. He asks her to look at her feet, where a pile of manure is located next to her. He continues to scream and asks her to plunge her sword into the manure pile. And although Grimelda was extremely surprised by such a request from her brother, but given the situation, she immediately complied with his words and turned the sword over and plunged its blade straight into a pile of cow dung, which was originally a bait for Taros. Grimelda's flaming sword, plunging into a pile of cow manure, caused a violent reaction, and huge clouds of thick steam began to pour out of this pile in all directions, obscuring the visibility on the street. Thanks to this strange maneuver, Agredios and Grimelda managed to distract the huge bull. Startled, he began to scream loudly and stopped. And finally, he stopped, dragging the tired Agredios with him. While the huge bull was distracted by steam, the sister of Agredios, Grimelda, who had the opportunity to act, immediately rushed to the attack, under the furious cry of her brother, who ordered her to immediately hit the monster. Taros is furious. He kicks his hooves in all directions. Grimelda attacks Taros, trying to stab him with her flaming sword. Her brother Agredios screams loudly, ordering her to plunge her sword into the monster's ribs. Welcoming the newly arrived people, Agredios gloomily thinks that apparently the church burned down the village of all these people, and because of this, they became refugees and headed towards the possessions of Agredios. Grimelda tries to deal a crushing blow to the monster, but her sword is stuck in his body. The bull swung a huge hoof to crush her. At that moment, Agredios jumped up and pushed Grimelda out from under the blow with a strong push. Grimelda flew away from the impact, releasing her sword, which remained stuck in the monster's body. Agredios understands that they need another blow to win. Picking up a shovel, He makes a circular U-turn. Agredios, with a shovel in his hands, strikes the monster with a furious blow, screaming in anger and aiming clearly at the hilt of Grimelda's sword, which continues to stick out between the monster's ribs, where she drove it. Suddenly, the monster froze, as did Agredios, who was still puffing furiously after the blow. Suddenly it dawned on him that the blow had reached its target and it was over. They had won. And as if to confirm his thoughts, the huge monster toros, who terrified people and whom they lured out of the forest, collapsed to the ground with a long sound and a crash, crushing a very surprised Agredios. At the same moment, Grimelda, who was looking for her brother, and a crowd of refugees from Achilles ran to the fallen monster, who vied with each other shouting that they need to finish off the monster and finish the job. In the dark, the screams of people can be heard saying something rhythmically. It turns out that the refugees are moving the carcass of the defeated monster with coordinated movements in order to pull my lord out from under it. He grabs their hands, and they shout that they are pulling him out. Finally, the carcass of the monster gave way, and people, pushing against it with their hands and feet, almost pulled Agredios out from under the bull. Everyone is crowding around Agredios. Everyone wants to help and support him. Joyful people surrounded Lord Agredios, who is freed from the monster carcass. Everyone is happy to see him, glad that he is alive, and asking if he is all right. Understanding from Earth, Lord Agredios hesitated a little and asked the people present to call him by other than his title. Putting his hand to his chest and smiling gratefully, Agredios asks people to call him simply Agredios, asks people to call him simply Agri. Agredios' thoughts on what was happening in the world were interrupted by a wop running up to him. He's out of breath and worried. He speaks loudly by name to my lord, apparently wanting to tell him something important. Suddenly, someone in the crowd of people shouted loudly, long drawn out, demanding to let him pass, and someone crashed into Lord Agredios, who was barely standing on his feet, while hugging him fiercely. Ula swooped down on Agredios. She is glad that he is alive, but she cries in 3 streams, screaming that he scared her very much. Agredios silently put his hand on her shoulder, and his friend's hand on the defeated monster, as if inviting her to look at their handiwork. Jumping on a defeated bull lying next to it, Agredios helps Ula also climb up. Surprised, but silently climbs up. Agredios sighed and seemed to be preparing to make a speech. Suddenly, Lord Agredios, standing on the back of a bull, abruptly threw up his hand and shouted loudly to the whole street, attracting the attention of the crowded people and informing them that they would still live. The people standing around are taken aback by Lord Agredios' words and silently look at him, and Ulu, who is also very surprised. Then Agredios asks why everyone around is so quiet and asks them to rejoice. Agredios, still sitting on the back of the defeated Taros, crouched down and, smiling happily, shouted loudly to the people around him that they would have a steak from a bull for dinner today. People crowded around uncertainly ask each other, repeatedly repeating the word steak, as if they still can't believe their luck. Finally, their voices become joyful, and they shout that they will eat meat. There is general rejoicing in the street. Agredios smiles happily and waves to people. Ula happily jumps in the back of the monster, and people standing around, throwing up their hands, shout words of gratitude. Agredios loudly asks if any of the idiots present know how to carve animal carcasses. And fortunately, there are a couple of craftsmen among the people who promise the Lord that everything will be done in the best possible way. Only Setia is not happy. Agredios asks Percy to take some of the idiots to the local butcher shop, and Steele offers to put logs under the carcass of the defeated Boltauros to move. Sisha continues to sit thoughtfully in place. A little boy turns to Krunig and gives him a flower wreath. The man asks if his ear hurts. Observers notice that the man jumped aside, but decide that the arrow grazed his leg. The main character asks why. If the bishop is trying to make a liberator hero out of Krunig, then he only incites hatred. Zyra looks down and says she wants someone to stop it. Someone in whom Krunig saw hope. The main character objects. He says he is motivated to act by circumstances that have isolated the country now, as they did 200 years ago. And if he can reduce the number of paths, then all that remains is to kill each other. The bishop says that this will be their common redemption with the main character for the equally grave sins of guidance and inaction. That's how it is, says the young man. He darkens his face and says that he understands everything. Zyra turns to Nene, hands her a dagger and orders the girl to kill the main character. At the same moment, the heroine jumps towards the young man, raising a weapon over the main character. Margrave Agredios dodges the blow and deftly intercepts the girl's hand. The young man throws her over himself. The girl falls with a crash and hits the floor. Nene screams in pain. The main character thinks he has neutralized her. The young man feels some movement behind his back and turns around. The bishop is conjuring something in his hand. A moment later, a spear shoots towards the main character. The young man barely manages to deviate. The commander gives the order to the archers to prepare for the second volley. Without unnecessary suffering. Beat to kill, he shouts. The man tells himself that he is doing dirty work, committing the murder of the bastard king. The spear pierces the column, next to which Inquisitor Grueling stands. The young man falls to the floor. The girl raises her blade over him to deliver a decisive blow, but the main character manages to block her attack. Manny's body is gradually recovering from the fall. Wounds heal on their own. The main character is amazed that after such injuries, the girl did not even flinch. The bishop fires water shells at the young man. Margrave Agredios is surprised by his tactics, realizing that his body should be covered by the girl's body. Zyra shoots directly into the back of her ward. The projectile flies through the girl and aims towards the main character. Grueling jumps up to the young man. The man pushes Agredios Ormelian aside. The heroes fly away from the girl. The main character is in pain. Nene rushes at him from behind, but the young man pushes her away with his foot. The girl flies away towards her Lord Bishop and falls into a pillar of magic created by him especially for her. A young man is watching the heroine. He gets to his feet and starts walking on the wet floor. Margrave Agredios thanks the Inquisitor for helping him out a lot. The main character asks Grueling if he can move. He replies that there is no problem. He gives the soldiers the order to shoot. The observer says that they missed as Grueling hid behind the trees. He asks the commander what he will order. He asks if the young man has practiced such cases. The main character says that he takes the bishop on himself. The Inquisitor is surprised by the decision of Agredios Ormelian. He says they can't see anything because of the steam. Grueling clicks his tongue and says that there is no need to doubt the main character. The young man glances at him and asks the Inquisitor to sort it out while he's here. Jeanette jumps out of the fog towards the main character with a knife at the ready. Grueling jumps up to her from the other side. He pushes the heroine away, not letting her interfere with the Agredios. The main character uses a strong thread again. He throws it up and, thanks to this thread, moves with greater speed, can explode upwards. The young man swings, then pulls himself up and watches the bishop from a height. The main character jumps right onto the Zira. Agredios Ormelian knocks the man down and they fall to the floor together. The contents of the bishop's stomach spill out of his mouth. The main character wrings Zyra's hand behind her back. He screams in pain and breathes heavily. The young man discovers that his hands are shackled with ice. He tries to move them, but to no avail. The bishop puffs and chuckles. I told you that magic accumulates in the body. Zyra grins. The main character grabs his hair with his teeth and lifts the man's head. He screams in surprise. He commands no one to approach because it is suspected that the Inquisitor is infected. The man orders to prepare what he asked for. An observer calls out to him. Meanwhile, the Inquisitor dealt with Nene. Bishop Zyra begins to panic, realizing the situation he finds himself in. Grueling looks very sad. The Inquisitor, with bitterness in his voice, says that he respected the bishop with all his soul. The man regrets that Zyra did not provide everything to him. He swings and is about to strike the bishop. Someone interrupts him, addressing Mr. Zyra. Nafka runs into the hall and shouts that the capital is under threat of infection with dysentery, so you need to notify immediately. She doesn't have time to finish and stops when she sees what's going on. The girl exclaims in surprise, seeing in front of her two men who defeated their opponents. They are also surprised. The bishop and the Inquisitor address Nafka with one voice. Zyra is silent, and then turns to the gracious Margrave. He frees the young man's hands from the ice and asks the main character if he wants to make a deal with him. The bishop says that, on behalf of the church, he officially assures that the heroes will be provided with provisions and will be allowed to take the orphans with them. The bishop turns to his subordinate and tells Nene to stop. He promises that he will keep his word, so he gives the provisions and orphans to the main character and his friends. The bishop laughs and says that he did not expect such an unexpected and incredible chain of events. It seems strange to Zaire that Krunig violated the order, because he would never do that. The warrior says that the target has been attacked. The commander asks who did it. Meanwhile, the main character asks a friend of the king's son to lift his leg because he is looking for him. The man asks him if it really gives the young man any pleasure. He volunteered to go himself, pointing out his royal origin, and was adamant in his desire to provide the orphans with a future at the cost of his own life, and followed his squad, deciding that this time he would save the hybrids from new troubles. Zaire feels like a puppet in the hands of the nobles, so he accepted the condition to get rid of him with a stone in his heart. He pushed Krunig to kill Nafka and the others. All this is to incite hatred as a result of burning nonsense, which weakened the nobility. That is why the bishop is very surprised that Nafka is still alive. He asks the girl if she is capable of disobeying Krunig. The heroine is very scared. The bishop says he wants to ask her something else. Zaire is interested in how Nafka was able to determine that the capital was in danger from dysentery. The girl gets lost and can't say anything. Nafka, you don't have to answer, Krunig shouts at her. The bishop is surprised. He starts laughing and asks if that's really their answer. There is something in the new settlement that can neutralize poisons and distinguish miasma, the bishop shouts. The gracious Margrave. He turns to the main character and tells him that he was engaged in baby Gree's teeth almost every week and would like to see her for a long time. Closer to the point, the young man demands. The bishop asks Agredios not to break his neck after these words. Zaire asks the young man for permission to go to the settlement ahead of the company. This is necessary so that the bishop has a chance to ask Gree about this something that the main character is trying so hard to hide. In return, Zaire promises provisions, orphans, and a proclamation from the church to the capital. These are the conditions, he concludes. The young man thinks about it. He understands that if he kills the bishop here, then the residents of the city may not react that way. Otherwise, the man will definitely kill Gree. He gets annoyed and asks why he took it at all. The main character, dressed in a bearskin, tells Krunig to shout whatever he wants. The main thing is loud so that the soldiers can hear it. A man has to fake his death. The bishop grins and asks Margrave Agredios not to make such a sullen face. He says he and Krunig are very similar. Both are like an open book. The bishop invites the main character to talk about the implementation of the plan. He promises to arrange immediate delivery from his stocks, but warns that it will take one day. Therefore, in order not to be stabbed in his sleep at this time, the bishop decides to sign the proclamation right at the checkpoint, in front of the guards. The main character releases Zaire. He says that everything will be ready by noon tomorrow at the North Gate. He asks the heroes not to be shy about showing up there, because the bishop will bring the orphans there as well. Is there anything else? Zaire asks. The young man replies that the bishop should cover half of his spending on beans. If he touches the orphans, the main character promises to kill him. The man insists that this is not in his best interests. Margrave Agredios calls his comrades to leave, reminding them that Mian is waiting for them. Meanwhile, the boy is busy near the cart. When he sees the main character, he calls out to him and says that he has done everything that he asked. Mian asks his drenched comrades what happened to them. The main character replies that they had a little quarrel with the sorcerer, and he doused them. He thanks the boy for his help. The young man pays attention to the Nafka. The girl cries and scolds herself for being so stupid. Now Mrs. Gree and Setia are in danger because of her. Margrave Agredios touches her and calms her down. He tells the girl that she is not to blame for anything. He's good himself, since he put Gree on the scale. Anyway, the heroes cannot help the residents of the capital without the help of the bishop. Kruing is surprised that he will have to shout, "A high-born hillbilly, the kidnapper of people," a fool in the shadow of his younger sister. He begins to call for help. The main character suggests that everyone change their clothes before anyone catches a cold and relax. He tells Krunig that the beans stay on him. The young man realizes that they are now one step behind. He is afraid that the bishop will detain them at any cost. The next day, Krunig and Nafka meet with the orphans. The characters are very happy to see the children, so they embrace them. One of the orphans asks where the others are. The bishop replies that they are in the settlement. He suggests that we go together to see them. Zyra says she will be waiting for them there. The road is full of dangers, so he asks to take care of the orphans. The main character realizes that the bishop still used orphans to detain friends. Grueling asks that even with a cargo horse, even on foot, the young man go ahead. He knows that if you let these crazy warriors into the village, something terrible will happen. The main character replies that a carriage with 6 horses in a team will not catch up anyway. He offers to follow Zyra to the gate, saying that he has an idea. The young man says that they saved the orphans, received provisions, and the epidemic in the capital will be prevented. Everything is going well. The young man says that it remains to help Gree and the others who remained in the village. Go ahead, he commands. The action takes place in the settlement a few days later. The villagers draw water from the well. One of the men asks the girl if there are any leaks. She replies that everything is fine. Did the stinky beans turn out well? Another girl asks. Being bullied by a bear is the worst thing you can think of. A man shouts. The commander hears this and hands over the letter. He orders the Inquisitor's sword to be taken away and the letter delivered to the capital. Just wrap them in straw and put them next to a warm sword, she says. You can eat, says the girl, tasting the beans. The girl turns to Seisha and asks her to try it too. She says it's made according to her recipe. The witch holds her nose and refuses to try. Slipping stinky beans to others is so much fun, the little girl rejoices. The girl asks her what kind of dirty thoughts they are. Seisha says that beans bring both benefits and a strong curse to the human body. You can eat no more than 1 such proportion per day, she explains. The girl remembers something and turns to the witch. She asks Sedia what she liked the most from what they ate. From what they ate, the heroine asks again. The stinky beans are not very good, Sedia says. But the witch really liked the shrimp and fresh fish. The girl looks at her friend and realizes that, compared to their first meeting, the witch has changed a lot. Sedia praises the sweet and crunchy grist cookies. The girl agrees to bake more. She noticed that the witch was smiling more often. Gree remembers something else. The children ask if, when the sugar handed over by the ministers of the church runs out, the heroes will no longer be able to eat sweets. The girl suggests that they ask the expert this question. The orphans don't understand what she's talking about. He says that we need to wait for the screams to subside and at this time continue preparations. A scream is heard in the forest, ordering the characters to stop the performance. It was terribly difficult because the children from the living hive are so timid, says another girl. Gree asks if worker bees can be skittish. Birds, spiders. Bees have a lot of natural enemies, the girl replies. After all, they were protected by their fighting brethren in the living hive. The large body allows bees to collect a lot of honey, but they also move more slowly. The girl catches a bee and says that it's just spring. This is the time of selective breeding. She shows the bee and says that this baby is a drone from another hive. The girl ensures the alternation of generations, preserving the useful features of honeybees from a living hive. She says that in a month their children will bring honey. The girls are happy and encouraging the bees. Satisha says that Ula is doing the same thing as the Forbidden Forest. Gree asks if her friend is talking about crossing insects. Yes, insects, plants, and animals in the forest are continuously evolving. Taros and the living hive are creatures born in the forest and eventually went beyond it, says Sedia. She says that when the wind blew, her barrier was also swept away. Following the wind, those who fly and those who run left the forest and were eaten by humans. People are very strong. Gree says she's not feeling well. She's amazed that the animals are coming out of the Forbidden Forest. The witch replies that people had begun to live too close to the forest. Perhaps the forest has already made man a part of its evolutionary chain. Sedia says that really scary things are not visible to the eye, so she worries about everyone. Gree asks what she means by that. A male beekeeper notices something near one of the beehives. The beekeeper had never seen such a strange bird with thick paws and creepy claws before. That's enough, the girl screams. The Inquisitor asks the heroine not to make noise and not to stick out at all in such an environment. Ula asks his father if he's okay. The man asks his daughter not to make noise and leave here. He wants Ula to give something to the soldiers, but does not have time to finish. The bird rushes at the beekeeper. She screams loudly and throws the man away. Ula looks at the monster in horror. The girl rushes to her father with grief. The heroine scares the bird away with her magic. The monster croaks and rushes from side to side, engulfed in flames. The bird is running away. Meanwhile, the girls are raising the beekeeper. Grease screams at everyone to run away. Ula turns around and sees that the bird is chasing them and is about to overtake them. The girl stops and wants to stop the monster. The bird stops right in front of the girl. Satisha shouts to Ula to take care and take Wab away. The girls lay the man down and heal his wounds. Ola is worried about her father. The beekeeper clears his throat and comes to his senses. At this moment, the bird's cry changes. A whole flock of huge birds is heading towards the heroes. Gree realizes that the bird has called his friends and tells everyone to leave. The girl runs to help her comrades along with the knights. She screams that it is better to leave the fight against birds to them. The child replies that he is fine and notices that this is necessary so that he can see his mom and dad. The man asks himself what happened to Nafka in the end. He doesn't remember when it was or what is happening to him now. The boy calls out to Mr. Agri and asks him to look at what is behind him. She commands you to stay out of the way and keep your distance. At her command, the knights stand in a crescent and surround the opponents. The girl turns to Perua and asks her to send the residents home. She decides to buy time for evacuation and does not let any monsters in. The orphan runs to the villagers and attracts attention to himself. She tells everyone to run home and hide. The man asks her what the panic is. The girl replies that they were attacked by huge, scary birds as tall as dows. Mrs. Gree told everyone to hide in their houses. The man asks again. He looks into the distance and then scolds the birds and calls on everyone to help Mrs. Gree and others. A brave girl is ready to defend the village. An axe flies past her and plunges into the monster's head. A man from the village appears behind the heroine. The villagers are shouting and calling the birds to fight. The girl sees support from their side and wants them to fight, commanding them to enter from the side where the axe flew. The warlike men follow the heroine and shout that they will tear apart all the enemies that stand in their way. Shield bearers hold the line. Heal her in the legs, the girl commands. Men throw axes at a flock of birds. Now the shield bearers are finishing off, and the villagers are taking the axes. The brave heroine is in charge. The pack leader lets out a loud scream. The girl realizes that with this cry he is calling his brothers for help. The main character is surprised by the burning arrows, finding this decision prudent. He decides it's good for them. The young man says that the team will get lost in the smoke and climb the cliff. She commands everyone to come back and stand around her and get ready for a new wave. The cackling of birds is heard. A lot of bright lights are looking at the heroes from the forest. A new flock of birds is approaching the defenders of the village. The shield bearers are preparing for a new wave. Gree tells the warriors that no monster should break through. She wants to add something else. Birds run out of the forest to meet the heroes. Men from the village and swordsmen prepare weapons for battle. The girl takes a pose of combat readiness. Magical fire engulfs her entire body. She asks you not to worry about her, no matter what happens. The heroine rushes to the first bird, running to meet her. Mrs. Gree, one of the men, screams in horror. The bird strikes the girl with the strongest blow. The man watches in fear the scene of the duel unfolding before his eyes. The girl dodges and repairs her wounds. The heroine runs away to a distance so as not to fall under the clawed paws of the bird again. The enemy attacks Gree again. The girl deftly jumps over the bird and cuts off its head in one motion. She lands in a combat-ready position. One of the shield bearers stutters and wants to say something. He gathers strength and shouts to his comrades to go into battle and fight for Mrs. Grimelda. "Dancing flames," he exclaims. The warriors rush into battle and pile on the birds running at them. Is he crazy, the man asks himself? He does not understand how this can be done. The heroes fix the rope on the cliff. Having come together in a battle with monsters, the knights understand the strength with which they have to fight. The shield bearers decide that while they are distracting them, Mrs. Gree, Dow, and the others can. The fighters do not have time to complete their plan. The villagers rush to their aid. "I'm sorry it took so long," one of the men shouts. "We'll cover it." The other one echoes him. Feathers are flying from all sides and screams are heard. Grimelda watches the birds retreat. Are they really running away, the girl asks herself. She decides that they managed to overwhelm their opponent with numbers. "Let them go back to where they came from," the girl says. The heroine turns around and sees Setia behind her. Gree asks what it is. "Let's kill all these birds and let them go on a barbecue," one of the villagers suddenly shouts. The girl notices that, having said, "Let's interrupt." The man borrowed her phrase. "In that case, that's what we'll do," decides Gree. Together with the villagers and shield bearers, she rushes at the birds running away. After the battle, the heroes are engaged in cleaning and processing bird carcasses. "Rub them well when washing," says one of the orphans, who oversees the correctness of cooking. "In order not to get scalded, it is necessary to wear leather gloves," she advises. The girl shows the place where to put the plucked birds. "The buckets will be replaced on the next bird," the little heroine warns. The girl walks between the vats of water and the workers. She looks around as if she's looking for someone. "There is no sign of Mrs. Gree," the girl says, approaching another orphan. She is surprised and asks if this is really true. "Excellent," says the main character, checking its strength. The team starts climbing the cliff. Suddenly, the heroine notices Mrs. Gree's knees sticking out from behind some outbuilding nearby. Perura sneaks up to the corner of the building and turns questioningly to Mrs. Gree. She's worried about the girl's condition after the battle. The girl is surprised at how much the heroine's hairstyle has changed after the battle. The girl became curly, although before that her hair was absolutely straight. Ms. Gree explains that this happens to her every time she fights at full strength, but does not use a sword. The girl looks at the heroine and tries to hold back her laughter. She breaks down and starts giggling. She's touched by the new hairstyle. A second orphan approaches the heroines and does not understand what is happening. "What a hairstyle you have," the girl says. "Is it really like Mrs. Grieg?" the second orphan asks. The girls decided they need to go to the river. Nearby, Grimelda meets Setia. She turns to the witch and asks her what she is looking at so intently. Setia says that the birds they saw came out of the lech and almost killed Ula's father, Wop. She says that if Gree hadn't been around, then everything would have been much worse. The witch wants to say something else, but she stammers and cannot begin. Setia says it would be better for her to go back to the forest. Otherwise, something more terrifying will cross that very place, and then all her comrades are doomed. The heroine looks very depressed and scared. This thread does not even care about such a height. The hero is surprised. The young man tells his companion to tie a rope around his waist so that he can lift him up the cliff. Gree asks the witch what place she is talking about. The girl wonders what Setia was doing there. Setia replies that she collected what people exhale, only it was more dense. She grew plants to go without food. That's why, while the witch lived there, the animals couldn't get through. The girl says that if she needs to be in that place all the time so that her friends can continue to live without fear, then she will do it. Grimelda says that if Setia makes such sacrifices, she will be all alone again. The witch confesses to her friend that she does not want to be alone, but even more, she does not want others to feel bad because of her. Grimelda replies that it is possible to do without such serious sacrifices. She hugs the heroine and invites her to always be the four of them on a small bed. "Always, always," she repeats. Meanwhile, the villagers continue to process their prey. They are surprised at how healthy the shins of birds are. One of the guys asks Grandma if she can pickle them. She says they need to be cleaned well before salting. Gree calms Setia down. She says that people are actually stronger than the witch thinks. If they are attacked, the heroes will simply eat them. Men from the village complain about the hard meat, which is not cut at all. They decide to call Setia for a moment. Gree takes the witch by the hands and says that as long as she stays with them, she is already one of them. Agredios says that his friends will rest here today. It is better not to make a fire, he warns. They will set up camp again tomorrow when they have a chance to swim. These words inspire Setia. They give her hope, so the witch asks the girl how she can be useful. Suddenly, people start paying attention to Gree's hair. The girl tries to correct them and feels awkward because of the large number of glances. Ula asks the lady what happened to her beautiful hair. Meanwhile, one of the villagers tells off that Nitos showed respect. "For God's sake," the man exclaims. He doesn't understand how his friend can afford to laugh at someone who has helped so many times. At this time, Peruna herself passes in front of them with her head held high. Everyone present is touched by how cute the girl looks. Setia is watching her new companions. They are frantically trying to discuss something with her. Gree realizes that Setia cannot return to the forest. In this case, you need to come up with a way to confront the monsters. In the background, the characters discuss the game and how it was cooked. It's delicious on the spit, too, and she can hear the screams. The girl thinks about it and decides that it would be good to build fences, but against someone like Taros. In the distance, the girl sees an approaching horseman on foot. She peers at the horizon, and then her face lights up with a smile. Zarchik? Is it really him? The heroine screams. The man says that anyone who goes further will not be allowed back, no matter what their status or reasons. The Bishop of Zyra, who recently lives here, is equally concerned, he adds. The man gives instructions to make sure to go around, since they also burn the road through the forest. He sees that there are only women and children among the travelers, so he instructs in no case to put out the fire at night. The travelers thank him from the bottom of their hearts. The young man suggests that the Inquisitor make a small circle and enter the city from the east. He says that he will go while he tramples the route through the foliage, and asks not to forget about the insect repellent that Ula gave. One of the orphans turns to Navka and asks the girl why Krunig and that unknown brother who was next to him took off the canvas and their pieces. When the procession of women and children left the gate, they immediately ran away. And really, why? Navka answers the child. Her goal is to get the children to the village as soon as possible. That is why she suggests that the boy catch up with his friends and ask them on his own. Kroanig asks Agredios if the young man knows why the wind is blowing. He is surprised to suggest whether his friend has fallen into religion. The Inquisitor swears and says it's science. He explains that they are now being pushed by an air current, which allows them to rush straight to the scorched grove. He is surprised that everything has swam ahead of them so far. That's exactly what Kronik was talking about. The bishop will probably make a detour, which will delay him for a day or two. He says that the wind arises because of the temperature difference. The burning forest receives colder air from the south, which further increases the wind. The man says that according to his calculations, at this speed they will get right up to nonsense. He decides that even if they fail to catch up with the bishop, they will definitely be able to close the distance. And you'll run away from nonsense, Krunig adds. The knights line up in front of the bishop who has arrived. His Holiness, Mr. Zyra, they exclaim. The shield-bearers say that they did not expect the bishop to appear in any way. Gree greets the man. She says she is glad to see Zarchik, but asks if anything has happened since he decided to visit them in his rank. Zyra replies that, as a bishop, he has come to reveal the truth. The man turns to the girl and asks what he sees. He is able to fight in confined spaces, acts independently in the forest, and easily climbs walls. A man assumes who he really can be. Gree is embarrassed and adjusts her hair. She says she's gone on a silent rampage. The girl says that she knows how Zyra will swear, but she's still the same tomboy girl as before. She suggests that the bishop postpone the sermons to her room because she still has so much to discuss with him. The man takes her hand and says it's impossible. It's all right, the bishop continues, because the heroine should die right here. The girl looks in amazement at how the ice instantly covers her. She cannot believe what is happening and asks Zyra what it is. Everyone freezes in horror. The shield-bearers shout at the bishop to stop. Gree asks the man if this high position has changed him so much. The bishop replies that it may be so. He became committed to certain methods. Suddenly, the ice breaks up. The heroine tells Bishop Zaire that in such a case, she will respond in kind. The girl squeezes the man's hand and says that she will burn to ashes in a second. Gree demands that the bishop tell him why he came to the settlement. Zyra laughs maliciously. He says it's hilarious to see how much brother and sister look alike. They even interrogate in the same way. The man promises that he will tell you everything, so he asks the girl not to incinerate him. The bishop says he wants him, like Nafki, to discover the way in which hybrids detect miasma. He says that this is not a request and asks the girl to look behind him. Behind, several of the bishop's servants are holding a little girl. Zarea says that he gave poison to baby Lupin, who was picking herbs nearby. The bishop says that Gree herself understands how little time they have. The next morning, the heroes set off. The main character says that they will be in town by noon and asks if the others are tired. Friends reply that everything is fine. Scoundrel, the girl screams. She's scared and cornered. Zyra offers her to let go of his hand. The heroine steps back a little and takes a distance from him. The bishop asks that hybrids can neutralize poison too. He made this conclusion because after the poisoning, Nafka was still alive. At this point, Lupin starts coughing. She doesn't have much left, because the poor thing is barely breathing. Grimelda shouts her name. The man asks the girl to show how they handled the poison. The girl understands that she cannot allow Zyra to meet with Sadia. The witch's power is too great, and if she falls into the hands of the bishop, it will not be good for anyone. Gree curses inwardly, remembering the poisoned Lupin. Magic surrounds the girl. She turns around and sees that Seisha is healing baby Lupin. The girl starts coughing. The bishop watches as she spits out the clots of poison that have accumulated in her body. Is Seisha really human? Zyra asks herself. Besides, it was magic. The man understands. At this moment, Margrave Agredios comes to the rescue of his friends. The main character jumps towards Lupin. He pushes away the bishop's subordinates and grabs the baby. Clutching her to him, he falls to the ground. Grimelda does not expect such an unexpected appearance. Seeing the help, she smiles. The young man remembers that he needs to prepare for a visit to the capital. He asks Mian if he will help him. The bishop says that he removes all restrictions and tells Nani to step. Lupin comes to his senses and turns to Mr. Agri with tears in his eyes. The young man apologizes for scaring her and tells the girl to run to the others. The main character asks the baby if she can move on her own. Agredios Oromelion says that he does not oblige anyone to fight the bishop, but asks his comrades to protect the villagers. Those in white robes behind are truly invulnerable. If you have to, you don't have to fight them. It's better to hold them. The bishop grins and says that the heroes got there quickly. He asks if the forest on the way is not boldly on fire. The young man replies that he took a shortcut through the smoldering area. The bishop invited him, so it would be rude to be late. Zyra replies that he understands everything. This behavior is typical for aristocrats who are running around with etiquette, but still the heroes should not have stuck their heads out. The bishop asks if they remember these children from the capital. Thanks to the continuous restoration of muscle tissue, they can run without rest for 3 days and 3 nights. If the bishop orders it, they will execute his commission. He asks what the hero thinks will happen to the one left behind by Krunig and others. The young man asks Zaire if he really wants a repeat of the situation in the church. The young man reminds that he is not in a position to threaten. The bishop asks what a small country armed to the teeth with magic is capable of in fear of invasion. He wonders how violent she can become. He says that Gree, like her older brother, knows nothing about this, but they are not ready to enter into a serious feud yet. The main character rushes towards his friend. He understands that the shooting is clearly open to defeat. Krondig turns to him and says he has a question. The man asks if the hero has studied the art of assassins. The man asks if the heroes have nothing to strive for. He says he sees that they don't hate hybrids. Religion puts the power of retribution into their hands without any compulsion. Discrimination is bad, he says. Discrimination brought on dysentery. If a hybrid is put in the place of a doctor, then people who do not seek help will die. And as a result, the bishop wants to be able to weed out supporters of discrimination. He asks the characters if they find his offer tempting. Seisha walks past the bishop. The man turns around, not understanding what is happening. Gree shouts to her friend to come back immediately. The witch doesn't hear anyone. Satya reaches out to someone and says that her soul and heart are being torn to shreds. The girl touches Nene's face. She says something to her, but Seisha doesn't understand. She asks again what the heroine said to her and says she didn't hear it. At this moment, everything in her soul turns upside down. Nee's memories open up, full of pain and suffering. The heroine absorbs these memories and the energy of the hybrid. The main character screams her name in horror. Seisha and Nene fall to the ground. The young man says he has a bad feeling. The bishop addresses his subordinate. He wants to touch the heroine, but his hands are intercepted by a witch. She turns to Mr. Zaire and asks why he did it. The man says that the hero has an authoritative sister. He is surprised and says that everything is completely different. The girl changes her face and repeats her question again. Black smoke escapes from it, which envelops the bishop. The main character puts on a protective mask and says that you need to stay away from this black smoke. The young man notices that something seems to have escaped from Nini and penetrated into the network. Grimelda starts coughing next to the main character. The young man turns around and discovers that everyone around him is coughing. People are getting cold. They are plagued by coughing, throwing them into cold, then into heat. Everyone caught a fever through the air. Zyro wonders if this is everyone's chance for redemption. The bishop addresses Nani and Setia. He says that the hybrid's bones were injured. He was hacked. The nobles in the church who ordered it, as well as everyone who knew about what was happening. But the indifferent residents are in that direction. The man points the way. Setia rises above the bishop and throws him aside. An unknown force is carrying her to where Zyria pointed. The main character asks her to stop, but the girl does not hear a scream. She retreats towards the city to take revenge. The young man freezes. Agredios feels powerless. How did it happen, he asks himself. The main character and his friends did so much for the sake of survival, but in an instant lost everything and felt the breath of death again. A young man lays a coughing girl on the ground. The main character draws attention to the bishop's horse, which is grazing nearby. The young man explains that his skills are designed to benefit from the forbidden forest. He passes the balm to Mian, saying that he needs to comb his hair. Margrave Agredios apologizes and begs the girl to be patient a little longer. He jumps on his horse and rushes in the direction where the witch went. The main character promises that he will definitely return. The company stops for a rest. One of the orphans takes care of the horse and turns to Mr. Krunig. The girl asks the Inquisitor who that brother was with them. The man replies that this is a local lord who appeared out of the fog like a real devil. He deftly intercepted his weapon and broke his arm with a hammer. The girl exclaims admiringly and says that the main character does not look so scary. Another child says that a young man can catch even such a big Twunchitsroars as in the picture. He says that everyone needs to see it. Krunig says that Agredios doesn't really look like it but behaves like a psycho. Nafka was so scared that she almost fainted, he says. The man turns to Nafka and calls her. Krunig asks the girl to stop harassing herself with worries. He reminds the heroine how strong Margrave Agredios Otomeliun is. Moreover, he will have a fiery dancer with him. The man calms the Nafka. Krunig taps the girl on the forehead and says that he took the main character all the way to the nonsense, so he must arrive in the village before the bishop. Nafka screams in surprise. The man remembers that Setia will also be near the heroes and will be able to help in case of danger. Nafka asks him if it is true that the bishop does not know exactly how the poison was removed. Krunig thinks about it. He says he didn't swallow the poison himself. This woman Setia is a bit strange, the man adds. The witch heals from the poison in the form of a mushroom coming out of her mouth. Nafka laughs and says that it was very unexpected. A huge tree that does not take an axe, an incredibly large monster, and previously unseen plants. The young man says that his friends are the reason to do this. The girl recalls that Ula said that Seisha was probably a witch from the Forbidden Forest. Krunig replies that he is no longer old enough to believe in fairy tales, but this is the most reasonable explanation he has heard. The orphan says that he was asked to make a book with illustrations, the advice in which will be available even without the help of the network. The kid shows the heroes a way to cook raw fish with a delicious sauce. Friends are surprised. Raw fish, asks Naka. Does the cunning nobleman want to poison them? The man says that everything was fine because Mr. Agri magically killed the parasites. Nafka listens and asks to keep her voice down. She feels that someone is heading towards them from the forest. Kronig asks what she hears. The girl says that a horse is heading towards them. Besides, she hears some other unfamiliar sound. The main character is chasing Setia. He asks the witch to stop. The girl continues on her way, ignoring him. The young man realizes that even fire does not take these routes on which she moves. The main character worries that a little more, and they will cross paths with the Krunig group. Senna does not stop, but slowly turns to the main character and shows him one gesture. The young man understands what this means and flies off the horse with the help of a thread. The horse is instantly killed by stakes fired at it. The ancestors conquered the sea because they couldn't use the forest, he continues. The young man says that he is going to conquer the forest and give its benefits to his subjects. The main character remembers that when he fought with Setia during their first meeting, she also showed him gestures. They meant go away, but now it was definitely kill. Margrave Agredios remains without a horse. He realizes that things are bad because the forest is starting to end. Meanwhile, the heroine is moving further away from him. Suddenly, the young man sees a group of Krunigs stopped right in the way of Setia. He shouts at Mian, Krunig, and Nafka to run away from the girl. Sisha is approaching her friends. The second part of her asks them to run away and not approach her because she realizes that something dark has settled inside her. She says that there is a new she sitting there who is now angry, and desperate. Lucky ones, says the second part of her personality. She compares the characters to Nini, who had a completely different fate. The girl is angry that the hybrid was not taken to the shelter. Kronig looks at her and asks if this is really Setia. She replies that it happened because Nini was not special. Nafka and Mian are trying to cover the frightened orphans with their bodies. Setia sends stakes to Kruniga. The man does not have time to figure out what to do. But the main character comes to his aid. He pushes the Inquisitor away, saving him from death. The heroes fall, and the young man asks the man to grab the orphans and run away with them. Setia calls Agredios by name. He looks at her in surprise. The girl says that before she disappears, she wants the young man to take their head off their shoulders. The main character disguises himself and says that he will use his own methods, regardless of the magical power. She asks the main character to kill her. Margrave Agredios says he can't do it because he promised he would never hurt Setia again. The girl replies that Setia is changing, so if this process is not stopped, then she, or rather they, will sow death. She says she has become slow and her legs have weakened. Contagious smoke begins to ooze out of the heroine again. The young man screams so that no one inhales it. He asks everyone to step back. Setia says it's useless because no one will escape. The main character realizes that all his friends are infected. The second part of Setia's personality begs Margrave Agredios to end this because she doesn't want to kill people. The main character takes Kruning's weapon and says he will borrow it. Setia asks why the young man didn't get sick. The girl attacks the main character again, but he dodges the roots in the form of stakes. The young man breaks off one of the roots and rushes towards Setia. The heroine prepares to repel the attack. Margrave Agredios Oromeliun strikes. Setia screams in pain. The main character is surprised that the girl is so clumsy. The witch falls from the elevation of the roots. She's just like Setia, the young man tells himself sadly. At this moment, the mask is torn off his face. He decides that he will catch the monster and study the plants. The trees will wait for now, concludes the young man. With a new hairstyle and clothes, his appearance changes completely. The main character realizes that he was distracted. The mask has come off. There is no time, says the young man. He unbuckles his guard. Margrave Agredios rushes at Setia and tells himself to forget about everything. Now his main goal is to kill her. But then, what will become of the inhabitants? Who will cure them of dysentery? The young man asks himself. He flies towards the heroine and sets himself up to put aside all doubts. The main character takes out a package from a bag. Agredios says that no one will help his sick friends anymore. Setia attacks the young man again. Sharp roots dig into his protective vest, piercing the main character. Bye-bye, Agredios, the girl says with a sneer. The smoke clears, and the girl sees that, in fact, the main character was not injured. What she thought was a young man was actually just his armor. Margrave Agredios takes her by surprise and attacks her from behind. The main character tells himself that immediately after the checkpoint, Setia will get to the capital, where he will kill people. That's why the young man has to stop her here. Agredios Oromelion is going to strike, but he cannot do it. He remembers the girl's face, which he remembers and realizes that he cannot finish off the heroine. The boy tells Mr. Agredios that he looks great. Kronig reminds the young man that he's bad at politics. A young man falls to the ground and is injured. He remains lying on the ground, unable to get up. The main character realizes that he has broken his spine. The young man begins to have a wild chill. The girl bursts into nasty laughter. The main character gropes for something slimy on the ground. He looks closely and realizes that these are stinky beans. He wonders how they could have ended up in the bag and remembers about the package that Percy carefully handed him before he left. The girl asks him how he feels. The main character replies that he is shocked by his own naivety and no longer feels his legs. The young man imperceptibly burnt the beans in his mouth. It's good that the taste is gone too, the main character thinks. Mentally, he thanks the smart girl. She probably cooked it herself, thinks Margrave Agredios. The young man turns to Setia and asks if she hears him. The main character decides that Percy cooked the beans specifically to treat the girl. The main character decides that he will need to ask Mian to write down this recipe. The young man would like to add it to the delicious memories of the girl. Margrave Agredios says he can't get up. He asks his girlfriend to come closer to him. The girl is walking towards him. The main character says that they couldn't have done it without Setia. Taurus meat, raw fish with salty sweet beans, recalls the young man. The main character tells her that the girl is an integral part of these memories, not only for Perura and Percy, but also for him and Gree and Ula. She knows a lot for all the inhabitants of the settlement. The main character asks what if he burned through his youth and now he doesn't have to choose. The young man explains that thinking about it, he is not able to kill the girl. Agredios, says Setia. The main character kisses the girl, handing her healing beans. The characters move away from each other. The main character realizes that he cannot move because of a broken back. The young man says he can't kill Setia anyway because he did a terrible, stupid thing. The main character realizes that due to his carelessness, Setia, or rather Neen, will now infect the entire capital. The girl swallows the stinky beans. The young man asks her if she swallowed. He remembers that Setia hated smelly beans. The heroine sighs and says that is very tasty. The real taste of beans, says her second personality. The main character remembers that little Percy reacts exactly the same way. He asks the heroine if it's true that Setia is talking to him now. Or is it still Ninny? The girl replies, "What is it now?" They and their feelings are also divided in half. That's why it feels and understands everything. Delicious food heals Nene's heart and bitter memories. Her anger pain goes away. But the main sadness, the girl says. She feels that memories of good times are awakening in her. Her second personality sighs and says, "If only everyone could try it." The heroine regains her usual appearance and says that she understands, because Neen is actually a kind girl. The man asks if the young man really thinks he will believe this. How to say it, the hero answers, knowing that he will never be compared to Gree. Dark energy is coming out of the network. The main character feels his back pain gradually go away. He realizes that the heroine has returned to her usual state and heals him. Krunig, Nafka, Mian, the young man exclaims. The main character asks his friends if they are safe. The comrades answer in the affirmative. Kronig says he doesn't even know how it happened. He turns to the young man and asks what kind of face he made. The fever of the main character has subsided, and now everything is stuck in his mouth. While the young man clears his throat, orphans approach him. One of them says her name is Thorn, and she is very pleased to meet you. Danube and Hoppy also give their names. The Inquisitor calls out to the main character and asks what the Lord needs to do when he is greeted. Thorn looks at the young man. The main character greets them and says that he will remember the names of the orphans. Agredios or Amelion gives his name and says that he is the lord of the settlement to which the heroes are heading. The young man allows you to call him Agri. The Vow hero turns to Krunig and says that he and Setia will hurry back to the village. The Inquisitor agrees and asks how things are going with Bishop Zyra. The main character says that it doesn't look like Bishop Zaire could move. The young man felt Seisha's anger on himself. The Inquisitor grins and says that the bishop deserved it. Margrave Agredios or Amelion says goodbye to Krunig and asks him to take care of the orphans. The main character says that he's waiting for them in his village. The children and their guides wave goodbye to the young man. The young man tells himself how good it is that he has something in store for such an occasion in battle. So much effort to compensate for his shortcomings, and in the end he looks like a murderer, the young man asks. It's a shame, he says. The main character rushes to Setia and calls the girl. The young man says that they need to return back to the village as soon as possible in order to heal everyone else. The girl takes a few hesitant steps and then falls to the ground. The main character runs up to her and asks if she is all right. The heroine explains that she has two hearts, but at the same time one body, so her legs get tangled. The young man offers the girl to ride on the roots, and he decides to run next to her. Setia reaches out to him and asks Margrave Agredios to take her in his arms, just as he takes Perur and Percy. The main character is surprised and asks if the girl is not afraid of his touch. The heroine replies that the young man kept his promise to her and did not hurt her. The main character did not kill Setia, even when she asked for it. The girl gives her hand to Margrave Agredios and says that is why she is no longer afraid of him. The main character hubs Setia to himself. His feet are buried in the roots. The plants pick up the heroes and carry them towards the village. The young man evaluates the speed and says that this way they will return in a flash. Setia's hair flies straight into the face of Margrave Agredios. The heroine carefully frees his eyes from her curls. The characters look at each other and smile sweetly at each other. A young man and a girl stop near a dead horse. Satisha realizes in horror that they have killed the unfortunate animal. The man looks and chuckles. The girl tells him to apologize properly, but the hero says that he does not need it. The heroine examines the horse and addresses the young man. She confesses to Agredios that she is afraid to return to the village. She says she has cast a curse that leads to death in a few days. The heroine promises to return, but is afraid that she is now hated in the village. The main character sits down next to her and comforts the girl. The young man says that this is not true. Margrave Agredios reminds the heroine that due to the fact that she processed the meat of tauros, the inhabitants of Akinis did not have to starve. In addition, a large mountain of birds was caught and butchered in the village thanks to Setia. The main character asks the girl to let the villagers continue to turn to her for help. And also, the young man says, if Setia leaves, then Perura and Percy will cry so much that no one but her will be able to calm them down. The main character admits that he doesn't even want to imagine what Gree will do to him when he hears that Setia has decided to leave them. The young man asks the girl to consider that she is saving him. Margrave Agredios helps the heroine to rise. The girl suddenly laughs. The main character realizes that he has lifted her spirit and is also smiling with joy. The young man leans over to her and tells her to hold on because he picks her up. The man says that they are from the Flagon family, and he is accompanying his nephew. He recalls that they had heard about the tragedy on the Margrave's lands from fellow travelers. It seems they went to other villages to explore, the man says. The girl says that her friend is right. And finally, she wants to bring Nene back to Mr. Zaire if possible. The main character agrees, but asks the girl to take care of the villagers first. The couple rises on the roots and continues on their way. The heroes arrive at the village. Setia is quietly healing civilians. A girl caring for her grandmother is happy that the old lady is feeling better. The main character tells Setia that he understands how difficult it can be for her, but she needs to try and get out into the middle of the square. Sick people flock closer to the girl. Inhaling her magic, they are instantly cured of dysentery. Ula and two orphans rush to Setia and thank her for the cure. The girl says that all the pain is gone. Setia feels ashamed. She gets sad and says that she infected everyone in the city too. The girl asks Ula if it's true that they all hate her for it. Her friend yells at her and says that's not the case. She asks Setia how anyone can hate her. Ula hugs the girl and says that she understands her perfectly because she found herself in a similar situation when she found Tauros. She didn't think about anything except the lack of food that Mr. Agredios Oromelion had mentioned. The girl recklessly brought Tauros to the village, becoming a bait for him. Ola says that she's afraid to imagine what could have happened if Mr. Agri and Mrs. Gree had not coped with him. The girl remembers that she was severely scolded at that time because it was very dangerous. The heroine put not only herself at risk, but also all the villagers who could die because of her. Krunig asks the guard if they can find out how things are going in the capital. He replies that it is difficult to say, but the church tried to settle everything quickly. Ola says that you can apologize and promise that you won't do it again. Setia remembers how the main character apologized to her for scaring her and hurting her. He said then that he was very sorry and this would not happen again. The girl says that her friend is right and hugs Ulu even tighter. The heroine apologizes to her, Perura and Percy. Setia promises that she will never send diseases to them again. Ula snuggles up to her and says that he forgives the girl. Percy hugs Setia too and says that she did a great job for being able to apologize. Perura calls out to the girls and tearfully asks why they are all crying. The heroines hug once more and laugh through tears of joy. Gree finds the main character and turns to his brother. The young man asks what's wrong with the girl's head. Mrs. Grimelda replies that it doesn't matter and suggests that her brother should better follow her. She takes the hero to one of the sheds on the outskirts of the village and tells him that Zyra's squad is there. The superheroes enter a dark room. Zyra is surprised by their appearance. He says he couldn't even heal these children. The man gives up and asks if he can count on a quick death in memory of an old friendship. Grimelda says she sees how badly he has been beaten. However, this is not what her benefactress wants. Setia is healing Bishop Zyra at this time. He coughs and says that he did not expect to be cured. The girl asks if he is sure of this. They entered, it seems, without any problems. The man is happy. The streets of the city are deserted. He pays attention to the prices, noting that salt and millet have doubled in price. She leans over the man and asks if she is the enemy of them all. The hero looks at the girl in amazement. Seisha turns to Mr. Zaire. He is surprised and asks, is there a believer in front of him? Otherwise, why else would a girl address him in such a manner? Setia says that she is now, and Nani is with her. The heroine is going to return Bishop Zaire to his subordinate. The girl sits over Nani's body and breathes life into her. The girl's eyes open and she comes to her senses. Setia turns to Mr. Zaire and says that his soul has been damaged for a long time and is about to disappear. This is due to the fact that she controlled Setia's body in such a state. Zaira, horrified, asks the heroine what she is talking about. The girl asks him to take Nani's hand, because he will not have a second time like this. The man presses the heroine's hand to him. It won't. He asks again. In a weak voice, Nene asks him to read a picture book for her. A picture book, Bishop Zaire asks. The girl says she wants to hear about the big and strong of the three goats. She says that Nene also wants to become the same. The girl evaporates. From now on, she remains only in the memories of Bishop Zaire. The man remains seated. He confesses to everyone present that he killed the previous bishop, his father, with his own hands. And what about the poor? He asks. If there is a riot, the aristocrats will use magic to suppress it, and a real massacre will begin. Bishop Zaire says that he deeply respected him both as a specialist and as a priest, but forgiving his father for complicity in the dark deeds of aristocrats and conducting experiments on selected orphans was beyond his strength. The man says that not only his hands were dirty, but still, in order to destroy this system, the current bishop looked at both the Neen group and himself as nothing but a tool. He was desperate to end it all on their generation. The man says he has turned into an even bigger monster than his father. Bishop Zaire says that it manifested the flesh to the point that he destroyed these innocent souls. The husband drops tears. He sighs and says Nani's name, saying that he is very sorry. The bishop grabs the dagger. The main character notices his movement and anticipates the development of events. Bishop Zaire directs the cry in his direction, intending to end his life. The young man knocks the knife out of his hands and attacks the man. The main character lifts him off the ground and tells the bishop that now he is as much a prisoner as Krunik, and he will return with soybeans soon. The young man says that they will urgently plant fields with them. Although this is prohibited, Margrave Agredios says that Zaire will help grow a lot of stinky beans and purify the water in the capital. And at the same time, do not forget about preparing for winter, the main character reminds. The young man shouts at the bishop to stop whining and start working. A man is afraid of such pressure. He turns to Madame Gris and asks her if her brother has always been like this. She replies that this is not the case. The main character has always been more idle. The young man leaves and says that there is still not enough fuel in the capital for sterilization with boiling water. Margrave Agredios says that the ecclesiastical dignity of a bishop will be useful in this matter. It will be possible to install non-dangerous logs for urban needs, cleaned by the bishop at the entrance gates. We should at least check the safety of the water, the girl says. To do this, she needs a magnifying glass. He says that people always believe in immunity. Besides, the main character thinks that Zaire himself understands that the way to the capital is also closed for him. He suggests that he stay in the settlement and make amends to those children. The hero will give him something. Seisha says that the orphans will not live long either, so she suggests that the bishop, at least finally, give them good memories. The girl stops at the door and says that she would also listen to a fairy tale performed by Mr. Zaire, whom Neen has been waiting for so long. The heroine leaves, leaving the bishop alone with his heavy thoughts. 2 days later, a team of travelers led by Krunig arrives in the village. The man greets Margrave Agredios and says that they have reached. Welcome back. The main character greets them. Are you tired, perhaps? The sister of the main character asks. She says the tub is heated and is waiting for them to bathe in it. Krunig thanks Mrs. Grimilda and looks at the main character. The travelers brought fresh beans, which turned out to be enough for sowing. The villagers discuss that they have already found a suitable plot, and they just have to dig up the land and take Butch for plowing. They don't have a saddle or a harrow. The main character is watching what is happening in his village. At this moment, someone gently touches his arm. The girl from the village says that she has already made saddles and harrows for all the livestock. Residents also find a rope. They decide to go after the wild mulberry, asking if it is close. The young man squeezes Satya's hand. The girl is smiling. Peace and tranquility reign in the world. Meanwhile, Bishop Zyra reads fairy tales to the orphans, fulfilling Neen's last wish. The young man addresses the villagers and says that they need to get down to business immediately. Margrave Agredios calls on everyone to listen to him and says they will survive. What the characters call miasma cannot be seen with the naked eye. The girl takes out the water that Seisha gave her. If the local source is the same, then the residents of the capital are doomed, she says. A magnifying glass is available only at the Pharmaceutical Institute. The main character asks to rely on him, promising that he will imperceptibly borrow it from them. He asks Mian if he will let him use his dorm room. Of course, he answers, volunteering to accompany the young man. Agredios takes out the thread and deftly hooks its sharp end on his friend's clothes. He pulls his friend towards him, saving him from the enemy's arrow. The boy takes his friends to the art academy. They walk carefully through the corridors and enter the room. It's a little cramped for 4 people, but Mian invites the heroes to sit down. The girl says that they don't have much time, so they need to talk through an action plan. The main character says that Mian, as the only one able to reveal his identity, will cash out the bills in the bank and transfer the money to the people on the list. They'll use the leftovers to buy soybeans. Nafka will go for water and show the institute to Agredios. The young man turns to the man and says that at the checkpoint, they seriously wanted to kill him. He asks if the church could have negotiated this with the nobles. Kronig says he's worried about the kids. He says that he grew up in a shelter with Nafka and the rest of the hybrids. All his subordinates are like that. The man feels tense and says that only the bishop himself could order them to die and replace only his poison. The main character wonders if it was necessary to kill these people if the bishop had arranged everything so that the young man would return. Kronig says he should at least find out what's on his mind. He promises that if he succeeds in doing this, he will tell you everything later. The man leaves the room. Before leaving, he asks the main character to take care of the village and its people. The young man turns to Mian, saying that he knows his part. The young man calls Nafka and says that it's time for them to go to the institute. On the way, the girl tells Agredios that Kronig is popular with children, as is the young man. With such a face, the main character is surprised. With one movement, the young man pulls the warrior towards him. And life really flies before my eyes, he says, once he is safe. The main character turns to Kronig. Nafka laughs and confirms that it is with this one. The young man addresses her saying that he thought and decided that they should speed up because he wants to climb through the window. The girl is surprised. Meanwhile, Kronig is approaching the temple. The entrance is guarded by knights, but they make way for him to go to the door. The man turns to Bishop Zaire and says that Inquisitor Kronig is reporting back. The bishop replies that they say that his subordinate was bullied by a bear. Kronig replies that he must have been blessed. He asks how the bishop knows this. Bishop Zaire replies to the man that he used his life and the lives of his subordinates in a deal with the aristocrats to burn nonsense. Kronig asks if he can find out the reason for this. The bishop replies that the aristocracy has divided into 3 groups: the nobility, the mammonists, and the clique of militarists. The value of Kronig's life was designed to balance the burning of 1/5 of the granaries. Zaira is glad that he escaped the evil fate. He says that now, as exactly 10 years ago, other countries have shut themselves off from them. They're on their own now, so soon the harassment will begin, from which no one can escape. And it is this situation that makes Kronig's life so valuable. The man belongs to royal blood, grew up with hybrids, and also owns magic. The common fear of the aristocrats of all 3 factions is that a new force will come to power in the coming unrest, the bishop says. He turns to the man and says that he needs to get into the death of his subordinates. If Kronig does this, he will become a hero liberator of hybrids. To do this, Zaira is going to take away their magic from the aristocrats and use it as a weapon to absorb this country from within. The main character asks how his friend is feeling and if he is injured. He grins and says that he bit his tongue. The Inquisitor replies that the bishop is not allowed to see hope. Zyra is surprised and asks what hope he is talking about. The man says that the bishop proclaims liberation and at the same time calls for enslavement, not to mention suicidal orders. He says he knows an aristocrat who ate Taro's meat among the laughing hybrids. Krunig screams in anger and repeats his friend's words that circumstances create heroes. The bishop calls the guards. The guards run into the hall and twist the inquisitor. Zyra tells the man that he is motivated by a desire to protect orphans, and he will not hesitate to take their lives, because he has already had to make sacrifices. Krunig breaks free and demands to be released. The bishop says he wonders how many victims there will be before the man bows down to him in the dungeon. At this moment, the main character slowly descends from the ceiling. The bishop orders his subordinates to chain Krunig in a dungeon, and then take 3 of them from the orphanage and bring them here. Zyra doesn't have time to finish the thought. He turns around and finds the knights lying on the floor. The main character came to the rescue in time. The inquisitor asks the young man if he has been following him all this time. The main character replies that he was on his way, and there are those who would mourn Krunig. The bishop says that, as far as he knows, no aristocrat was in a close relationship with a man. He asks what the young man's name is. Margrave Agredios or Omeliun, the main character answers. The young man bows and says that he is glad to meet the esteemed bishop Zyra. The bishop asks himself if this is really the Romeliun who was with the cutie Gree. The main character is silent. Agredios says he doesn't think the enemies have finished firing. He tells Krunig to try to pretend that he was hit and hide under the trees nearby. Zyra admits that he is surprised, because the hero's subordinates willingly went to their deaths for the sake of those who stayed here. After all that had happened, he shared bread with this man. At this time, the characters are thinking about how to act earlier. It was impossible to use weapons. The bishop laughs and says that now, many things have fallen into place. He decides that the man has failed the task and asks if it is true that the people of nonsense are in the new settlement. Zyra says that Krunig could not condemn them to certain death and therefore had to come to him, even if it means hanging a target on himself. Agredios or Omeliun replies that the bishop is right. As he already understood, the heroes want to get some support from the church. In addition, they want Zyra to let them take the aforementioned orphans. The bishop is nervous. He replies that he will not tolerate interference from someone who knows nothing, especially if this person is an aristocrat. Zyra approaches the box in the corner of the room and addresses Nani. He urges her to come out. The creature responds that it obeys him. A half-girl, half-animal slowly gets out of the box. She exclaims and calls Mr. Zyra. The creature asks if the bishop will stroke her and asks him to do so. The bishop explains that this child's name is Nene. Up to a certain point, the girl was an unremarkable child, however. As you can see, the animal features appeared in her too vividly. Zyra says he couldn't send her to an orphanage, so he found a use for her next to him. The man grabs the girl and pierces her heart with a dagger. The man asks the hero what kind of thread he had, which he was waving in the forest then. He replies that it doesn't matter and hurries his friend to leave faster. Krunig asks what to do with his sword. The young man tells him to leave him. The heroes are horrified to watch this cruel spectacle. The girl screams in pain, choking on blood. The bishop takes the dagger out of her chest and says that this child could only become an object of medical practice. Meanwhile, the heroine's wound is gradually healing. The girl clings to him and begs Mr. Zyra to stroke her. The heroes watch in amazement as the bishop heals the heart pierced with a dagger. The young man says that this is impossible, and he has never heard of such a thing. On the contrary, what has just happened is very similar to Cecia's magic, he thinks, remembering the witch. After the tragedy that happened 200 years ago, the aristocrats transferred healing magic to the church, subject to research, so that it would be possible to heal not only external wounds, but also organ damage, poisoning, and disease, says Zyra. The main character remembers that Seisha can do all this. The bishop tells about that experiments were carried out on such children in the church, and then they were treated for wounds. Many lives have been tortured, so he will not forgive those who invented it. Zyra says that people like Nini are survivors in the midst of madness, pain, and death. He makes an incision on her shoulder. Then, 3 years ago, it was proved that as a result of prolonged contact with magic, it tends to accumulate in the body. There is power in these children, the bishop continues. By increasing their number, he is going to use the magic he has laid down to put an end to that social structure. The main character indignantly asks the bishop why, then, standing in front of them, he is so cruel to this girl. The church kept people with weak abilities away from the capital. With the hands of the inquisitors, she got rid of the local gods and promised protection to those who accepted the same faith. He continues.